After dispatching all the wizards, Draco stood before Walburga, the air heavy with the stench of blood and magic. He had leveled up to 74 after the carnage, and he knew that killing Walburga would propel him to the threshold of evolution. Yet, today was not the day for her death. Walburga was far too valuable to Draco's plans, a keystone in the unfolding events he sought to control. Hexenact, the organization Walburga led, was integral to the Khaos Brigade. Without her, Rise of Him would lack the support to unleash the Trihexa, a pivotal moment in Draco's carefully orchestrated future. Her survival ensured the rise of enemies strong enough to provide him with the experience he needed to grow even further. Killing her now would be short-sighted. Walburga, as twisted as she was powerful, stood before him with a lascivious grin. "Oni-san, you're so cool," she purred, her voice laced with mockery and desire. She sucked her fingers suggestively, her free hand disappearing beneath her skirt. The pungent scent of arousal reached Draco's heightened senses, confirming that her depravity was genuine. Disgust churned in Draco's gut. He stepped closer, his shadow enveloping her as her breathing quickened and her movements became more frenzied. Her flushed face radiated an unsettling blend of excitement and madness. Without a word, Draco's hand shot out and gripped her neck, lifting her off the ground. Walburga's response was grotesque. Her tongue lolled out, and she squirmed in what could only be described as ecstasy. She was a masochist to the core. For a fleeting moment, Draco felt the dark allure of absolute power over her. The idea of reducing this dangerous, chaotic woman to his slave was tantalizing. Yet, it was also a trap. Walburga's volatile nature made her a liability, one he couldn't afford to let too close. "Pathetic," he muttered, tightening his grip just enough to make her lose consciousness. Her body went limp, but not before a shudder indicated she had climaxed. Draco dropped her to the ground like discarded trash. "Did I do a good job?" he asked dryly as Talia emerged from the shadows. "You're not going to kill her?" she questioned, her tone laced with confusion. She had watched Draco eliminate the other wizards without hesitation, so sparing their leader seemed illogical. Draco shrugged. "She's more useful alive." Talia's instincts told her not to pry. As an emissary of Artemis, her role was to observe and ensure Draco adhered to the goddess's directives, not to meddle in his strategy. Still, she couldn't shake her unease about Walburga's lingering threat. Draco's focus shifted abruptly as a wave of energy rippled through the air. His sharp senses picked up the disturbance immediately, and Talia's gaze darted in the same direction. "A sacred gear," Draco murmured, his mind racing. He recalled that Satel's team had a transfer-type sacred gear user. A trap had been set, likely targeting him and his companions. A telepathic message from Mordred interrupted his thoughts. "Master, Satel and his team have arrived. They seem interested in Tobio and the others." "What are your orders?" "Let him talk," Draco replied. "The more information we can extract, the better. Avoid killing him. He's a valuable source of experience. Once their team withdraws, secure everyone except Valina. Our mission to recover the remaining Shirakoma is complete. Send Valina to me once you're done." "Understood." Draco severed the connection and turned his attention to Levinia, who was locked in combat with Augusta. He could already feel the clash of their powers, bursts of intense heat and cold that distorted the atmosphere. The battlefield unfolded before him. Levinia and Augusta stood on opposite sides of a wide river, their Longinus towering beside them. Levinia's ice construct shimmered with frigid energy, while Augusta's fire colossus radiated blistering heat. Spells erupted from their magical circles, colliding in deafening explosions that scarred the landscape. Draco's heart ached as he witnessed the destruction wrought upon the forest. The cries of nature resonated in his soul, a painful reminder of the cost of power. He pushed forward, arriving at the riverbank as the battle intensified. Lavinia's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Augusta's predatory grin. The witch's voice dripped with mockery as she noticed Draco's arrival. "Oh, little guest, do you think you can survive a battle between Longinus wielders?" Augusta sneered. Draco remained unfazed. I'm not here to fight you alone. Levinia and I are a team. A gray aura flared around him as he activated his Tuki, drawing energy from the surrounding forest. His stats surged, and though he still fell short of matching Augusta's raw power, his role wasn't to overpower her. It was to support Levinia and exploit any opening. Augusta's smile faltered slightly as she felt the shift in energy. Interesting, she muttered, her gaze narrowing. Lavinia's voice cut through the tension. Stay focused, Draco. We'll end this together. Draco nodded, his resolve solidifying. He wasn't alone in this fight, and together, they would ensure Augusta learned the folly of underestimating them. The battle was far from over, but Draco felt a surge of confidence as he prepared to tip the scales in their favor. Cuckoo. Augusta's eerie laughter echoed through the air, sending an involuntary shiver down Draco's spine. That sound always carried an unsettling weight, and this moment was no exception. With a twisted grin, Augusta spoke. You're wrong. So very wrong. Glenda gave us that information willingly. Everything about your Longinus. Draco's eyes narrowed, his thoughts racing. Glenda? The Witch of the South? That didn't align with what he knew. Glenda was supposed to be the good witch, the benevolent figure in Lavinia's life. Why would she betray Levinia? What are you saying? Lavinia's voice wavered, her face a mixture of disbelief and anguish. Augusta's grin widened as she continued, her tone dripping with mockery. Oh, Levinia, you're still so naive. Let me educate you. Glenda has always been with us. That whole good witch nonsense? Just a story spun by our allies to control perception. She left our side during the faction wars because she had no interest in the petty squabbles. But she's always been one of us. Levinia froze, her mind reeling from the revelation. For a moment, silence engulfed them. But then, lies! That's a lie! Levinia screamed, her voice trembling with rage. Draco had never seen her like this. Levinia, the warm, gentle presence who always smiled through adversity, now stood consumed by fury. It pained him to see her this way, her emotions laid bare. Augusta chuckled darkly. Oh, it's no lie. Let's hear it from Glenda herself. Shall we? She raised her hand, conjuring a communication magic circle. Neither Draco nor Levinia intervened, both recognizing its purpose. Can you hear me, Glenda? Augusta called. After a pause, an elderly voice responded. Augusta? Why are you contacting me out of the blue? Lavinia's breath hitched. That voice, it was unmistakable. Augusta smirked. Your disciple, the Ice Princess, is here. She's been searching for you desperately. Care to say something to her? Glenda's response was as cold as ice. I'm not interested. Lavinia's trembling intensified. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. Even Draco was taken aback, though he had prepared himself for the possibility of unpleasant truths. Augusta laughed maniacally. How wicked! Didn't you once love her like a daughter? How cruel you've become! For a moment, silence filled the air before Glenda spoke again, her tone even harsher. Levinia, I don't care about you. Not at all. The communication circle vanished, leaving an oppressive void. Lavinia's wand slipped from her grasp, her arms hanging limp. Her Longinus mirrored her despair, ceasing its combat stance. The person who had given her hope after her family's death had shattered her world with a few words. Lavinia's lips trembled as she finally whispered, No, no way. Her voice cracked, her anguish spilling out in a heart-wrenching cry. Impossible. It's a lie. Her legs gave way, and Draco rushed to catch her. As he held her, Augusta conjured a new magic circle, and black energy began to swirl ominously. You've lost your will. It's time. A sinister black aura enveloped Levinia, spreading rapidly. Draco's heart raced. This was dark magic, a possession spell that preyed on the victim's broken spirit. Levinia, consumed by despair, was utterly vulnerable. Don't let that take her, a voice rang out. Talia emerged from the shadows, her movements swift. Draco turned to her urgently. Do you know what this is? Magical possession, Talia confirmed grimly. If her will breaks, her body will be lost forever. Draco's mind raced. He couldn't dispel the magic, but he could slow it down. Golden scales formed on his arms as he activated Holy Healing Claws. Holding Levinia tightly, he poured his sacred energy into her, creating a barrier against the encroaching darkness. "Talia, cover us," he commanded. Talia nodded resolutely. "I've got this." Draco's sacred energy held the curse at bay, but it was a temporary reprieve. Lavinia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Dear," Draco's voice was gentle. "I'm here. You're safe." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Why did Ashishisama reject me?" Draco stroked her hair softly. "Sometimes people hide their true selves. Glenda may have used you as a research subject, or perhaps there's more to her story. If you want answers, you must face her directly." Lavinia's gaze met his, a spark of determination returning. "You're right. I can't believe Augusta's words. I need to confront Ashishisama myself." Draco smiled, relieved to see her resolve rekindled. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips. "Dear, I love you," she murmured. The words carried a depth that shook Draco to his core. Before he could respond, a notification flashed in his mind. The level of Nephilim Dragon has increased from 74 to 75. Nephilim Dragon has reached its max level. Draco tightened his embrace. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead.
Hey everyone, Quantum Audiobook here. Sorry for interrupting, but if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your thoughts on this novel in the comments, and don't forget to like the video.
While Draco was helping Levinia, Talia was facing Augusta. Augusta flashed a nasty smile when she saw the teenager in front of her. Kaka. Talia seemed like a normal girl right now. Her aura gave off nothing special, unlike Draco's, and she was not famous in the supernatural world as she had joined the Slayers of Artemis only months before. Even though Augusta had a relaxed, mocking attitude, however, the fire giant at her side remained ready to attack at any time. "Child, who are you? Do you really think you can stop me?" Talia's eyebrow trembled slightly as she heard how arrogant Augusta was. She slowly lowered her head, then raised it with an extremely arrogant smile. "Old woman, who are you? I don't even have to strive to defeat an old woman at death's door. Tell me, how old are you? 80? 90? I see. You're ashamed to see that your face looks like a rotten peach. That's why you want to take Lavinia's body." Talia attacked Augusta directly with words. But Augusta simply let out that nasty laugh once more as she waved her hand. "Kaka." Talia sensed danger and rushed to play with the bracelet in her hand. The bracelet began to transform me, growing in size and taking on a circular shape. The bronze circle surrounded Talia's arm, protecting her in time from the purple fireball. The fireball, which had thrown Incinerate Anthem, impacted directly on the shield. Augusta laughed again when she saw this. "Kaka, know your place, child." Augusta's laughter stopped when she saw that Talia was totally intact. The attack of the Longinus had done her no harm. "Yes, you?" Augusta's eyes widened when she saw the shield in Talia's hands. More than the shield, she recognized the image that was carved into it. She stepped back instinctively, a trace of fear running through her eyes for a moment. Augusta quickly calmed down and analyzed the situation better. The head of Medusa, that's Aegis. The reason Augusta had felt fear had to do with the shield itself. One of its abilities was to interfere with the minds of its wearer's enemies, causing them to instinctively fear the shield. It seemed that Augusta had guessed the identity of the shield. However, Talia shook her head. "This is not a real shield, but a gift from my father." The real shield was turned into a sacred gear. After all, it might not be the real shield, but Augusta wasn't going to let her guard down over that. If her deductions weren't wrong, the material that had been used to create the shield was celestial bronze. Celestial bronze, along with imperial gold, were the two most precious metals in Greek mythology. However, the celestial bronze was much better than the imperial gold. The celestial bronze is extracted by the Cyclops from Mount Olympus. The ore is formed by tempering the metal on Mount Etna and cooling it in the river Lethe. The metal is deadly to the creatures of the magical world. but it is useless against humans. The only exceptions to this were the semi-humans, semi-gods, semi-yokais, semi-devils, and the users of sacred gears. Weapons made from celestial bronze cannot harm other humans and simply pass through mortal bodies as if they were made of smoke. This is because humans are at a lower level than demigods or gods, so they are not worthy enough to be harmed by the weapon. Celestial bronze was a very precious material for Greek mythology, and no one outside of this mythology could use it. Augusta asked as she clenched her teeth. "What is a Greek doing in this place?" Talia shrugged. "My job was to watch that boy, but now I'm a little upset. I'm sure humiliating an old lady will brighten my day." Augusta showed an immense reaction of rage and began to create various magical circles. The first attacks were easily dodged by Talia. They posed no danger to her. However, Augusta increased the intensity of her attacks, probably outraged by the ease with which Talia evaded her attacks. Not only did the magical circles increase in power and number, but Incinerate Anthem, the fire giant, began throwing huge purple fireballs. Finally, there came a time when Talia was going to be hit by an attack. Once again, Talia took a small object out of her pocket. It appeared to be a small hilt, but it began to expand until it reached its maximum length. A long spear of heavenly bronze appeared in Talia's hands. She cut with it horizontally, successfully cutting down the fire giant's attack. Talia's blue eyes shone like lightning, and sparks leapt from the spear. Augusta's face darkened as she murmured, "Daughter of Zeus," to which Talia responded with a smile. "It's time to finish your last dance, old lady." Draco was helping Levinia get rid of the curse when he heard the sound of footsteps. He did not put himself on alert, as he had already felt the presence of this person for a few seconds. Big brother Levinia, Valina, came out of the trees. She didn't know anything about the situation Levinia was in, so she looked quite energetic. But her face changed when she saw the black fog surrounding Levinia. "What's happened?" Valina rushed to the side of Draco and Levinia. Although Draco was wrapping his arms around Lavinia's waist, he was not doing so because he had lewd intentions. With his arms surrounded by golden scales, Draco was helping Levinia recover. Lavinia's eyes were closed, and she didn't seem to have noticed Valina's arrival. She was too busy fighting the curse of Augusta to pay attention to what was going on outside. "I'll be brief. Augusta is trying to take Lavinia's body for herself. Levinia is fighting the curse, and I'm helping her." A big explosion happened at that time. Actually, it had been going on for a while, the result of the battle between Talia and Augusta. "I need you to use your sacred gear, Valina. Just once is enough to help Levinia." Valina nodded after listening to Draco, and 2 wings of light flew from her back. She touched Lavinia's forehead lightly, and a noise came out of the wings of light. "Divide!" In a single moment, the fog surrounding Levinia was halved. Lavinia's face, which before seemed to be suffering a lot, visibly relaxed. With Valina's help, Levinia was no longer going to have problems recovering. These were the advantages of having Longinus on the same team. Even if Augusta could take Lavinia's body, Draco had a way of dealing with that. And that way had a name and a surname. Tobioicus. Canis Lycaon could cut through anything, including divine concepts. If so, why couldn't he cut through the soul of Augusta that resided inside Levinia? Draco asked Valina. "Valina, how long can you use your balance breaker?" Valina seemed to hesitate for a moment. She was probably arguing with Albion about something. She finally nodded and turned to Draco. 10 seconds. Draco nodded. 10 seconds was enough. "I want you to go and help Talia face Augusta. I will support you from here. Wait for my signal to use your balance breaker." "What's the signal?" "You'll understand when you see it." Valina nodded her head and flew off in the direction that Talia and Augusta were fighting. Valina was surprised when she arrived. The area where the fight was taking place was completely destroyed. The fire giant that used to be 3 meters tall was now over 10 meters. It seems that Augusta hadn't been fighting seriously before. The witch was constantly creating spells, putting pressure on Talia. The Slayer constantly dodged attacks, or protected herself from them with the shield. From time to time, she would throw lightning bolts with her spear at Augusta, forcing the witch to defend herself. Overall, the fight was pretty evenly matched. Suddenly, a white flash fell on the battlefield. It was none other than Valina flapping her wings of light. She exuded a very powerful aura, more powerful than she had ever shown before. She had not advanced directly into the fight, but had prepared herself for maximum performance. Augusta tells Valina, who was floating in the sky, "So you finally appeared, Hakurku." Valina says to Augusta with an extremely upset expression. Levinia was very careless. "If this is all your level, I was not wrong to think she was enough to face you. However, having that person on your side must have had some negative influence on her sacred gear." After hearing those words, Augusta, showing a smile full of displeasure, made use of something she should never have done. "VA-chan, I wish you wouldn't get so upset about this. Don't you want to be the great VA-chan you always are?" Augusta spoke with Lavinia's voice. "What do you think? Once I take control of that girl's body, I can keep pretending to be your big sister. That was most likely a taboo. That was a line not to be crossed." The aura that enveloped Valina's body was expelled at an extraordinary level. The young woman's expression had turned to anger. "You dare to use that voice? You dare to call me by that name? How dare you?" Trembling, Valina screamed, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Valina was very angry. Levinia, one of the three people she loved most, had been the victim of a mental attack. They'd played on her emotions, and they'd practically made her collapse. And now, did this witch dare to use the nickname that only Levinia had the right to use? Did she dare to use the voice of her dear older sister? Did she dare to suggest the possibility of supplanting her? Unacceptable. Valina wanted to activate her balance breaker already, but she still remembered what Draco had told her. She had to wait for the signal. Luckily, it came just seconds later, and the signal was Guro, the roar of a dragon. The dragon's roar filled the entire forest, even to where Mordred and the rest were waiting. It was a majestic roar, full of royalty. The same could be said of the aura it displayed, which could be divided into two types: a mixture of extremely dark and extremely sacred dragon aura. A perfect blend of two things that were thought impossible to combine. Valina recognized the signal Draco had sent her. Without a second thought, she screamed, "Balance breaker! Vanishing dragon, balance breaker!" With Albion's voice resounding, Valina's body threw a dazzling white glow. After the light faded, what was revealed was pure white armor with a pair of wings of light. It was Valina's balance breaker, the armor of the White Dragon Emperor, divine dividing scale mail. Albion shouted in Valina's mind, "Valina, you can only assume the shape of the armor for a short time. Even 10 seconds will be more than enough." Valina, having invoked the skill, used high speed to touch Augusta only once before taking some distance. To avoid Valina, Augusta began to expand countless magic circles. How terrifying! So you can use the balance breaker even with that little body. It's wonderful. It's amazing. From the countless circles of magic, she was firing magic repeatedly on a scale that was unmatched by anything she had used before. Flames, ice, bursts, lightning, darkness, light. It was a complete burst of every attribute. Even Talia had to temporarily protect herself from the barrage of attacks. Valina didn't flinch at all, however, and approaching at high speed, raising the aura in which her body was wrapped to the maximum, she held her right hand forward. Dividing. Divide, 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 divide. Along with the voice pointing to the skill, which resonated several times, there was a change in the mass and scale of the many spells intended for Valina. The magical attacks decreased by half, then by half again, and again by half as they seemed to be reduced repeatedly. In the end, the entire explosion of magical attacks had diminished in scale to the point where they were almost non-existent. Valina easily denied it with a wave of her hand. She had not been able to have Augusta's power, but it had been possible for the magic of the Mega. Augusta was in shock. Divine dividing of the White Dragon Emperor. As far as the balance breaker is concerned, her power is exorbitant. Even in this situation, The magician's eyes glowed with greed. She wanted that sacred gear so she could break it down and study it quietly. Valina gathered a tremendous aura in her hand and shot it at Augusta. Augusta expanded a defensive-type magic circle, but, due to Valina's greatly increased power, who assumed that the armored form had exceeded Augusta's expectations in both power and density, the witch immediately assumed a heavy stance. For a girl to have so much power, this is one of the two heavenly dragons. Then, this is Lucifer. Realizing that Augusta had fallen to her knees on the spot, Valina looked back at the fire giant behind her. I will deny that. Extending her hand, Valina unleashed an aura bombardment on the fire giant. Feeling this, the fire giant moved his cross and created countless fireballs of enormous power. However, Valina dodged with agility and quickly got to where the fire giant was. She only had to touch it once. Have to mention, even the landscape around the fire giant was distorted. It seemed that Valina's ability could even affect space. Valina's aura enveloped the fire giant and seemed to be reducing it. Still, the fire giant also threw up a purple aura and was able to resist it. Valina's aura and the fire giant's aura were competing, and it seemed that the fire giant was retreating. Could Valina, in her present state, defeat the fire giant? No, compared to when she first transformed, Valina's aura had diminished. Based on this, it seemed like she was approaching her limit. Valina's talent was a certainty. She had achieved Balance Breaker at such a young age. It should be noted that Levinia, being 5 years older than Valina and recognized as a genius among geniuses, had not yet been able to achieve the Balance Breaker. Although Levinia's case seemed to be more related to her state of mind than anything else. However, Valina's talent was not packaged with her own amount of aura. In other words, even if she could get into Balance Breaker, she was now running out of energy. However, Valina defended herself with her remaining aura without dissolving the transformation. Divide, 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 dividing. Like a child screaming about being lost, Valina somehow unleashed her plow to the limits of her power over the fire giant. Valina screamed to the sky, "If I can't stand this, even hitting that man, hitting rise of him, will be impossible. Now, seeing a kind person hurt in my eyes is unacceptable." She shed tears as she screamed at a frantic volume. Valina launched what appeared to be the last of her power. A huge amount of aura was released from her tiny body. Therefore, dividing. It was at that moment, a dry, grinding sound echoed throughout the area. The next thing they saw was the arm of the fire giant that had flown away. But it didn't stop there. The entire body of the fire giant was distorted both vertically and horizontally, as its size seemed to gradually decrease. Another arm flew out, the cross collapsed, and finally even the head broke off. Seeing the fire giant disappear, Albion shouted, "That's it! It's done, Valina!" The armor disappeared, and Valina returned to normal. Her breathing was heavy and painful, but her expression showed her usual innocence. Naturally, "I'm Valina, the descendant of the Mal Lucifer." At that, Valina lost consciousness and fell to the sky. A pair of arms caught her. She was none other than Talia. "You're so strong at such a young age. You impress me, and at the same time, you make me sad. What did you have to go through to acquire such a thirst for power?" Talia remembered her own past and slowly shook her head. Her mother used to beat her when she was small because she was the daughter of the god Zeus, and she even abandoned her younger brother because she believed that this would get Zeus' attention. Talia and Valina did not know this, but they shared certain things in common. Footsteps were heard approaching, and Talia turned to see Draco. He held Lavinia in his arms, and there was no longer a trace of the black mist. The curse had been completely lifted. Draco looked up at Augusta, who seemed to have lost all hope. Her lifeless eyes stared at the ground. Had she died already? No, she was still alive. That was good. Draco could start to rise levels in this new evolution if that was the case. Draco carefully left Lavinia on the floor and pulled Gondiva out. He pointed to the sky and began to recite the chant he had already recited once. "It's time to make a sacrifice to the goddess Artemis." Draco created 2 magic arrows and pointed them at the sky. Not only was this a sacrifice to the goddess, but a warning to all who were watching this fight. With my bow and arrows, I respectfully ask for the divine protection of the sun god Apollo and the moon goddess Artemis. Draco released the 2 arrows, which flew into the infinite sky. At some point, these arrows stopped. I offer thee this calamity. The arrows, which were already 2 pseudo-noble phantasms, were divided into hundreds of these. If this was a B-range noble phantasm with normal magic arrows, what was its true range at this time? Phoebus catastrophe. The hundreds of arrows fell a few dozen meters away from Draco. They all fell around Augusta, making a circle with her in the center. From a distance, Artemis watched everything that happened in the forest. Everything that happened within it did not escape her senses, and she could see how Draco and Talia fought Augusta. At her side was her loyal lieutenant, Zoe. Talia was the youngest of the hunters, as well as the most talented of them all. Both the goddess and the lieutenant planned to make her the successor to the latter. That's why they kept a close eye on everything that happened in the forest, since they didn't want anything to happen to Zeus' youngest daughter. At that moment, something shone from the forest and ascended to the heavens. Artemis couldn't help but raise her voice. That's right, this was the same connection she had felt months earlier. However, as she was now much closer to this one, it felt 1,000 times more powerful. Artemis was naturally drawn to that connection. Zoe was equally or even more surprised than the goddess, but not for the same reason. She, the daughter of the Titan Atlas, could sense the divinity and danger of that attack. It felt like the holy lighting of Barakiel paled in comparison of this attack. As divine beings, their senses were far better than any human. They could see that what was shooting at the sky were 2 arrows, which then split into hundreds of these. Artemis recognized the first 2 arrows, as they were virtually the same as the ones Draco had created earlier. The multiplied arrows fell, creating a great explosion. Strangely, the forest was not damaged at all. Mind you, every battle that was going on at this point came to a halt. Zoe, let's go. Artemis turned around and proceeded to leave the scene. Her commander followed her without hesitation, as she had understood what Artemis meant. Every battle in this forest had ended with that last dragon attack. When Draco killed Augusta, a notice came that made him tremble with excitement. 7,900 experience points have been obtained. Because of the effects of title skill, Walking Egg, another 7,900 experience points were obtained. The level of Nephilim Dragon King raised from 1 to 55. Title skill, Magus Killer, LV1 acquired. Level of title skill, Magus Killer was increased from 1 to 2. 55 levels for killing Augusta. 15,800 experience points. This was crazy. Draco never would have guessed he'd get such a big score. Going up 55 levels in one fell swoop there were no words to describe it. Not only that, but Mordred and Kuroka should have gone up 2 or 3 levels as well. Talia was watching Draco in shock, feeling his strength rise so high in a single moment. A message appeared in front of Draco. After reaching the level of Dragon King, the system received a slight update. This caught Draco's attention. A system update? That should be a good thing, right? Status: Draco. Race: Dragon King. Level 55 out of 125. HP: 108750/108750. MP: 112500/112500. STR: 775. End: 725. AGI: 675. MAG: 750. Dragon King. Index 150 for HP. MAGX 150 for MP. Index 20 for HP Regen. MAGX 20 for MP Regen. This was not the only thing that was shown in the state, but also each and every skill appeared with its description and effects. This was something that Draco appreciated very much. I'll upload a separate chapter with all the skills, descriptions, and effects. It was not the time to waste time looking at the state, So Draco picked up the unconscious Levinia in his arms and went to Talia, who was holding the unconscious Valina. "Let's go, the mission is over." Talia nodded and followed Draco through the woods. When they left, someone appeared on the other side of the river. Everyone would recognize her the moment they saw her. In Gothic-style clothing, Augusta's disciple, Walburga, was approaching the body of her late teacher. Augusta's body was a mess after receiving Draco's noble phantasm, but Walburga didn't seem to mind. She still had that slight smile on her face. She, without any qualms, reached Augusta insides. What she got out of there was nothing but a purple fire. The purple flame, Incinerate Anthem, was burning over the palm of Walburga. Moments later, it entered the girl's interior, recognizing her as her new master. At the entrance to the forest, after the battle was over, Suzuku Himejima and Sairyu Kushihashi watched from afar as Draco and company drove out of the area. Suzaku says, "Although it seems Satel escaped, it seems the problem has been solved one way or another." Sairyu sighed. "It seems the Utsusimi agency has been sidelined by them. Those from the agency who had been tempted were also helping Oz and Satel. Still, they've been pushed aside after involving our 5 houses. Well then, in terms of the heads of each house, I wonder what kind of orders they'll leave us with from now on." Suzaku could only pray that they would not commit another foolish act and oppose Draco and company. Not only were they very strong on their own, but it seemed they had now gained the direct support of a goddess. Saya gave Suzaku some advice. "However, Suzaku, with the houses silent so far, I don't know what they will say to us in the future. Are you ready? Is what I should ask myself too." Huh. As he had said, the moment Draco and that girl hunter could fight Augusta freely and without restriction was because the practitioners of the 5 major clans were tasked with controlling a large number of people. Draco knew this, as she had been informed by the trees that numerous fights were going on throughout the forest between people heading towards Augusta and those who were preventing them from doing so. While it was true that all 5 clans were helping, Draco did not know whether to be grateful or not, as a great deal of EXP had been stolen from him. As a result of the work of Suzaku and Sairyu, the fight of Draco, Talia, and Valina against Augusta had not suffered any interference. "You explain your part." "I have no choice but to forcefully convince the head of the family against his will," Suzaku said with exasperation. Then it was time to consider what kind of explanation to give. "Well then, maybe you could tell me a reason that would make me agree." Along with those words from a third person, they came to perceive a powerful spirit nearby. When Suzaku and Sairyu turned to face the individual, there was a tall man in military uniform. With a look like that of a 20-year-old, he was a handsome man with sharp eyes. It was not a military uniform of the self-defense forces, but rather a special formal attire. Until he introduced himself, Suzaku had not felt any indication of his presence. For this man to accomplish this was in itself a magnificent feat. "You have come." The current head of the Nakiri house, Uryu Nakagami Nakiri. In fact, the man in military uniform was the head of the 5 major clans, the person with the most authority and the current head of the Nakiri house. The person carrying the strongest holy beast, Uryu. Not only did he have the strongest sacred beast, but he was the most powerful carrier in the history of this sacred beast. He was a man who would not lose to Vasco Strata, the so-called strongest human in his prime. Soon, I would like to interrogate those who participated in the incident related to the Utsusimi agency, starting with Tobio Accuse and his leader in the inner sanctuary, and I intend to propose the same to the other heads of families. I wonder if, perhaps, it will happen. Sairyu smiled bitterly in response to that statement. "The inner sanctuary? You seem serious, Uryu." Suzaku looked at him and asked a question. "What do you plan for them?" Uryu responded briefly. "That depends on their answers." Uryu was looking in the direction of the car Mordred was driving. While Tobio and company were fighting the remnants of the Utsusimi agency and the Wizards of Oz, 2 people were watching from the top of a mountain a short distance away. They were Vatican agents, David Serro and his student Fried Selzin. Not participating in the recent struggle, they, having decided to watch and wait patiently, had used a telescope to observe the battle between the opposing organizations. Augusta of the Purple Flame had been stopped with the power of Hakuryuku, along with that of a dragon and a huntress. As he looked away from the telescope, David muttered, "Absolute demise, incinerate anthem, divine dividing, canis lycaon." Ice and flame, black and white, then those four Longinus gathered in one place, huh? Is he the god of miracles, or possibly the god of mischief? I had understood the situation. We will withdraw now, freed. David told this to his student, who was taking notes behind him. Surrounding his student lay the atrocious figures of several corpses. They were remnants of the Utsasimi agency and Wizards of Oz who had attacked David and freed. Having been on the lookout for church officials to show up at this place, they had cornered them, but instead were defeated at their own game and met a gruesome end. David spoke to Freed, who was drawing a lightsaber from the body of a magician. Even if we get rid of so many heretics and witches, it shouldn't be a problem for our investigation. With a demented smile, Freed replied, "Boss, that means the previous aura was from a Longinus, right? Well, if that's true, they probably won't be killed that easily." David spoke. "Those were things created by our God, but because the humans they inhabit are random, if they lack mercy, they will lead to these kinds of consequences. As expected, the Longinus should be controlled by us believers." As he smiled politely, Freed asked his teacher, "What should we do about it if they cannot be controlled? I mean, besides smashing them up?" Freed said this as he put his hands on his head. David looked up to the sky as he pressed the cross to his chest. Naturally, there would be nothing left to do but condemn them. Talia had disappeared after fighting Augusta, and Levinia and Valina had fallen unconscious in the battle. Draco had had to carry them both to where the others were. Using the same car they had used to transport themselves to the battlefield, the group returned to their base. Draco began giving orders as soon as they arrived. "Cookie, Tobio, prepare a room for Koga and help him settle in. See, help Shigen." The boys responded without hesitation. "Got it." Draco then addressed the two new arrivals. "Tomorrow I will have a conversation with you. You can rest tonight. It's been a tiring day for all of us." "Thank you very much," Shigen responded with sincerity and gratitude. Koga said nothing and only looked at Draco with doubtful eyes, but ended with a nod. Those mentioned above gathered their things and headed for the apartment building where they lived, so only the rest remained. "Good work, everyone. Now it's time to relax. Mordred, get Valina and take her to her bed. She needs to rest." "Sure, master." Mordred took the unconscious Valina in her arms and entered the building with her. The girl was extremely exhausted after using her balance breaker to her limits, so it was best to let her rest in a separate room. Natsum followed Mordred into the house after sharing a hug with Draco. She knew that there was someone who needed Draco the most at this time, so it was not the time for her to waste his time. And so there was still someone left in the car. Levinia had managed to remove the threat posed by Augusta's dark magic, but not without consequences. That magic was extremely vicious, and Levinia had fallen into a kind of coma after winning the Battle of the Will. It was a temporary, harmless coma, probably not going to last more than 10 or 15 days with Grigori's resources. But the sooner she began treatment, the better. Levinia was lying in the back of the car. With her face completely relaxed, she looked like a little angel. Draco approached her and pulled back some of her hair that crossed her face before kissing her gently on the forehead. He grabbed her gently in princess style and pulled her carefully out of the car. Draco was greeted by Kuroka as he entered the house. "Draco and yeah." She was going to jump at him, but she saw he had Levinia in his arms. "Is she all right?" Kuroka's level of Senjutsu was higher than Draco's, so it was not difficult for her to see the traces of dark magic in Lavinia's body. She had seen Valina before, but she was simply sleeping. However, Levinia was not exactly in good condition. She has been affected by dark magic and still has some after effects. She'll be in perfect condition in a few weeks. Draco briefly explained the situation to Kuroka, who listened attentively. "You're taller now, yeah?" Kuroka laughed as she stroked Draco's head with difficulty. Draco no longer had the horns on his head, nor were his eyes different colors. His hair was now silver to black, and his ears had lost their pointy tips. Why had this happened? because of the evolution to Nephilim Dragon King. When Draco had entered the menu of evolutionary options, he had been surprised to find that he could only choose one option. This option was none other than Nephilim Dragon King. His surprise disappeared when he remembered that the system had told him that something like this would happen if he chose the Nephilim Dragon path. By choosing this path, he was closing the door to any further evolution. One of the benefits he had gained by evolving was the raising of the skill level that allowed him to take the human form, art of human transformation, to the highest level. With this, any physical trace of Draco's true race was gone. Not only that, but Draco no longer had to spend any MP points on maintaining his human form. Mind you, Draco maintained a debuff of 50% of his statistics in his human form. That's why it was still much better to fight in his dragon form, statistically speaking. Where are the other girls? Draco asked about the situation of Chiron and Aquino specifically. They were the only ones, along with Kuroka, who had not accompanied them on this mission. The two little girls are already sleeping. It's very late, so they were kind of sleepy. Draco nodded and said, I'm taking Levinia to Grigori. They can help with her recovery. Kuroka smiled and kissed Draco on the cheek. Don't be too long, Naya. We're waiting for you in bed. With that, Kuroka went into the room, where Aquino, Mordred, Chiron, and Natsum were already. Draco shook his head and let out a sigh, a small smile forming on his lips as he headed for the elevator. But something happened before Draco reached the elevator, something that he was waiting for to happen. A girl with blonde hair and red eyes stood in front of Draco. She was none other than Valerie Teeps. Valerie Teeps' relationship with all the members of Akatsuki was rather awkward. Although she had become more open to the residents of this house in recent months, Valerie remained cautious of them. Valerie, do you need anything? Draco asked politely. He knew what Valerie had suffered, and he knew how much she might have suffered if Mordred had not rescued her. The state Valerie was in after Rizavim extracted 2 of her 3 holy grails was one of the events that had shaken Draco while reading the DxD novels. Valerie's state was no different than having pieces of your soul removed. That's why Draco found himself unable to deal with Valerie in any way other than with absolute kindness. Although he didn't have any emotional or friendship ties with Valerie yet, he was unable to treat the girl in any way other than the best possible. And this only made Valerie more cautious of Draco. Why would a guy she didn't know treat her so well when she had been despised by every single person she had ever met? All these people who were part of Akatsuki, Valerie was afraid of them. She preferred to deal with people like her brother Marius, who didn't hide what a shitty person he was. It was more painful to be betrayed than to be mistreated. Physical pains can heal over time, while mental wounds linger over time. Valerie was a little nervous right now. She had heard Mordred and Natsum speak of Lavinia's condition, so she had rushed over before Draco took Levinia to Grigori. Valerie, even though she knew she should not trust anyone, had been unable to get Levinia away. The girl treated her just as kindly as Draco, but there was something different about the two that made Valerie feel much more relaxed. This was probably the fact that Draco knew Valerie's supposed future, which no longer existed, and her natural instincts warned her that he was strange. Another possibility was that Draco was treating Valerie kindly out of pity, while Levinia was just acting naturally. Levinia had helped Valerie control and use her Longinus during these months. Valerie knew that if she wanted to live in this safe place, she had to bring something to the group. She believed that they wanted to make use of their Longinus, just like Marius, but at least they were not going to experiment with her like her brother had done it. That's why she had made an effort to improve herself. In fact, Valerie had hoped that Draco would use her on this mission, and she was a little disappointed when she realized that he had left her behind. But now there was a chance to prove herself, though that was only a secondary motive for Valerie at this point. Right now, the second most important to Valerie was suffering, and she could do something to alleviate that suffering. Valerie took a deep breath and dared to face Draco. I can help Levinia. Draco raised an eyebrow when he saw Valerie's determination. She seemed quite sure of herself. Right, let's go to Lavinia's room. Draco didn't hesitate to act. He knew the healing abilities of Valerie's Longinus, so he was sure that Levinia could recover even faster with the powers of the damper. Valerie was amazed at how quickly Draco had agreed with her. He really trusted her? Valerie shook her head. It wasn't time to be thinking about that. Valerie hurried to follow Draco, and soon they arrived at what used to be Levinia and Natsim's room. I say it used to be, as they had been sleeping with Draco since they began to form emotional attachments. As they entered the room, Draco carefully put Levinia to bed. Then Draco looked at Valerie, waiting for her to work her magic. Valerie, for her part, bit her lip. She was now doubting if she really wanted to show Draco her abilities. What if he, finding out about her abilities, got too greedy? Valerie couldn't do anything to stop him in that case. Sigh. Draco couldn't help but sigh when he saw how uncomfortable Valerie was. She certainly didn't want to show Draco her skills. Listen, Valerie, I understand your concerns, but I think you're overthinking this. I'm going to leave Levinia in your hands. Let me know when you're finished. It was a shame Valerie still didn't trust Draco. Since she didn't want to show her skills in front of Draco, he was going to be considerate and leave the room. But Valerie grabbed Draco's shirt sleeve before he could get out. Wait! Draco nodded. Valerie was basically accepting Draco at this point. Maybe she had thought it was no big deal for Draco to see her abilities, or that she intended to let him see the process, but she had a few doubts. Whatever Valerie's reason was, it was time for her to start doing her job. Valerie held her hands to her chest, and a bright light illuminated the room. What appeared in her hands was a golden cup, one of the 3 holy grails that resides within her. Sephiroth Graal, one of the 13 Longinus, can connect with the realm of life and death. But that's not its only ability. The regenerative powers of this Longinus are only inferior to those of Twilight Healing by a small margin. This is worth mentioning, as it is only a complement to Sacred Gear and not its main ability. Valerie concentrated, sweat streaming from her brow, and a white liquid began to build up in the cup, and only stopped when it came close to overflowing. She brought the cup to Lavinia's lips and gave her this white liquid to drink. Draco watched in amazement as Lavinia's vitality and health slowly improved after drinking this liquid. As expected from one of the Longinus, its abilities are incredible. Well, she's getting better already. You've done a good job, Valerie. Rest for now. Valerie smiled weakly. She should not have smiled much in her life, as this one seemed a bit strange. This smile disappeared almost instantly, and Valerie adopted her neutral face again. Had Valerie taken Kaniko's place as the Kaderi of the group? Draco. Race, Dragon King. Level 55 out of 125. HP. 108750/108750. MP. 112500/112500. STR. 775. End. 725. AGI. 675. MAG. 750. Dragon King. Index 150 for HP. MAGX 150 for MP. NX 20 for HP Regen. MAGX 20 for MP Regen. Special skills. Sage. The conscience left in charge of the system by an old sage. It will answer all the questions of the host as long as it has the right level. Flight. The ability to travel the skies. Being a dragon, there is no problem with this activity. Darkness attribute. Nephilim Dragon is made up of a mixture of darkness and holy. The host can use dark-related powers with ease, as if it were something instinctive. Holy attribute. Nephilim Dragon is made up of a mixture of darkness and holy. The host can use holy-related powers with ease, as if it were something instinctive. Senjutsu. Magic system, used mainly by yokais. The host has the ability to manipulate its life force, chakra, spirit. The host has the ability to read the flow of aura in another person. The host has the ability to feel the environment. Accuracy. The ability to hit a target from a long distance. The host has perfect accuracy equal to 100x skill level meters. Every 100 meters past the level mark, host has 10% less accuracy. Presence detection. Ability gained through Senjutsu. The host can sense people at 100x skill level meters. This ability can be neutralized if someone has stealth at a high level. Aegis. Divine scales of the Nephilim Dragon. The result of joining a noble phantasm with the Dragon Scale skill. Attacks that have a power lower than the host Yindi are completely negated. Attacks that have twice the power of the host Yindi are 50% neutralized. Attacks that have triple the power of the host Yindi are neutralized at 33.33%. Resistance skills. Physical resistance. The ability to neutralize the damage done by physical attacks. Damage received by host will be negated by 10% X skill levels. Fall resistance. The ability to break a fall. Damage received from falls will be negated by 10% X skill levels. Hunger resistance. The ability to ignore hunger. Hunger will be reduced by 10% X skill levels. Poison resistance. The ability to neutralize a poison. Any poison applied to the host body will be neutralized at a 10% X skill level. Magic resistance. The ability to neutralize a magic attack. Any damage received from a magic attack will be neutralized at 10% X skill levels. Pain resistance. The ability to ignore pain received. The pain received by host will be negated by 10% X skill levels. Fire resistance. The ability to neutralize a fire attack. Damage received from fire attacks will be negated by a 10% X skill level. Darkness resistance. The ability to neutralize a darkness attribute attack. Damage received from darkness attacks will be negated by a 10% X skill level. Holy resistance. The ability to neutralize a holy attack. Damage received from holy attacks will be negated by a 10% X skill level. Normal skills. Inspect status. The ability to see the stats of a living being. The host can see the statistics of Tier 10 being X the skill level. If the being trusts the host, this previous limitation is cancelled. Breath of darkness. Flame of dark flames fired from the mouth of the host. Cost. 500 MPX skill level. Dark Fang. The darkness merges with the host's fangs, creating a powerful bite attack. Cost. 600 X skill level. Dragon Punch. The dragon aura gathers around the user's fist, momentarily granting the same power as in the dragon form. This ability is limited to the human form. Cost. 500x skill level. Numbing Darkness Claws. The darkness merges with the host's claws. Although its damage is less than Dark Fang, there is a high chance of slowing down or stunning the enemy if the attack is successful. Cost. 600x skill level. Anti-illusion eyes. Host's eyes can see through illusions. Depending on the skill level, host will be able to see through certain illusions or not. Cost. No cost. Art of Human Transformation. The ability to take human form. Cost. Because the skill is at its highest level, it has no cost. All stats, except AGI, are reduced by 50% while the host is in human form. Arrow Creation. The ability to create arrows from nothing. Cost. 1 MP per arrow. Because arrows are under the influence of a certain skill, its cost increases to 10 MP per arrow. Tuki. Tuki can be utilized by those who have trained in Senjutsu through controlling their base of life. In other words, creating an aura of life force around their bodies. As such, it results in a tremendous increase in their offense, defense, and speed. All statistics are increased by a 10% X skill level. Stealth. The ability to hide your aura from other living things. Hosts can hide their aura from Tier 10 beings, X being the level of the skill. Holy Breath. The counterpart to Breath of Darkness. Cost. 500 X skill level. Holy Healing Claws. The counterpart to Numbing Darkness Claws. It has small healing capacity. Cost. 600 X skill level. Close Combat. The ability to fight without weapons, only with fists. Cost. Passive skill, no cost. Title skills. Dragon King's son. The son of a Dragon King? Or maybe it was Dragon Queen. All resistance skills go up 1 level in each evolution. The limit is level 5. Walking Egg. Ability gained by acquiring consciousness while inside the egg. All the EXP obtained is doubled. In fight. Host is a lover of battles, even though you're not crazy about them. Still, you don't usually turn down a good fight if you have nothing better to do. Characters who are battle maniacs will naturally be attracted to you. Harmful Insects Killer. Host is a natural insect killer. Damage to insects increases by 10% X skill level. Path of Evil. Ability gained by performing evil acts. This skill affects the mentality and the following evolutions, not anymore since choosing the film Dragon Path. Evil characters will be naturally attracted to you. Path of the Hero. Ability obtained by performing heroic acts. This skill affects the mentality and the following evolutions, not anymore since choosing the film Dragon Path. Hero characters will be naturally attracted to you. Devil Killer. Host is a natural devil killer. Devil damage is increased by 10% X skill level. Fallen Angel Killer. Host is a natural fallen angel killer. Fallen angel damage is increased by 10% X skill level. The one who is loved by nature. You have a special connection to nature. Host is unable to harm nature. Nature is incapable of harming host. Nature will use any resource in her hand to help host. Archer. Ability gained by using a bow as a primary weapon. Any skill related to archery increases in level more easily. Anyone interested in archery will see you with favorable eyes. Evil King. You are a Nephilim dragon, a mixture of holy dragon and evil dragon, so you are also the king of evil. People against whom the host is hostile suffer from strong intimidation and lose the will to fight. This effect can be nullified in different circumstances. Extremely evil people will be attracted to you. Holy King. You are a Nephilim dragon, a mixture of holy dragon and evil dragon, so you are also the king of the holy. People who are appreciated by host will see their growth increased. Extremely kind people will be attracted to you. After completing their most recent experiment, Satel and the Wizards of Oz organization returned to the research institute they were using as a base. The location of the institution was an ample, pre-prepared space that had been established underground beneath one of Japan's urban areas. The site had not even been reported to the people of the Utsusimi agency. Those who could enter and leave now were only the personnel authorized by Satel, as well as the Wizards of Oz. From the beginning, the agency people had been used as sacrificial pawns. With the data from the time, they had been manipulating the Utsusimi agency. Together with the cooperation of Augusta, they had achieved the result they had been aiming at without any problems. On returning to his own personal laboratory inside the institution, Satel opened the cap of a cognac bottle that had been placed on the board, from which he poured some into a glass. The moment he took a sip, several mages entered the laboratory. They were mages with some leadership within the side of Oz. "So you have returned," Satel. Having received a greeting from one of the mages, Satel says, "I assume you are aware of the matter concerning Augusta. Even knowing that the Wizard of the East, who was one of their leaders, had perished, the wizards were not at all concerned. There is still the candidate for Wizard of the East. It's very nice that it was possible to recover the purple flames, the Longinus of the flames, which had been lodged inside Augusta's body, had been recovered by her disciple Walburga and had been taken back to this institution. No, he has let her recover the purple flames, who Satel was referring to, the witches didn't know. However, it was clear to Satel that, with the alignment they had prepared for that night, probably all the enemies of the strange rogue organization would have been eradicated if that man had so decided. Why had that dragon let Satel and Walburga escape? Satel did not know, but he was only excited to face such an unpredictable opponent. Walburga herself was in this room. She had been looking curiously at the experimental equipment in the room. In terms of the death of Augusta, her teacher, her state was one of total lack of concern. Were you able to get in touch with that side? Indeed. It seems that the Emerald City has woken up considerably. After all, we may be able to achieve our goal of using the 3 demonic beasts again. The 3 demon beasts of Oz were the lion with no courage, cowardly Leo, the metal man looking for a soul, dead lumberjack, and the brainless scarecrow, rampage scarecrow. Once again, using them had become the only goal publicized by the people of Oz. If this was their only target, Satel didn't know it, and he didn't care. One of the wizards turned her gaze to the corner of the room. There was a single long, sheathed sword sleeping in a capsule for exclusive use. Could that be a demonic sword? In response to the wizard's question, Satel stood in front of the capsule being fitted. It seems that among our opponents there are several who carry problematic swords. So, when I slipped away from Grigori, I simply thought of something I could take with me that would be useful. As he tapped the capsule with his finger, he said, "Arondite." the only legendary sword which falls from a sacred sword into a demonic sword. With this, either the sword of Longinus, or if it is that woman, I should be able to exchange a few blows with them. Above all, it is suitable for an angel who has fallen like me. Not only that, but this sword is considered a dragon slayer. More than one of Satinel's opponents are dragons, or their powers are related to them. As they turned their eyes to the sacred sword that had fallen, the mages asked Satinel, "So, what about the previous target? To invoke disturbing elements, power is necessary. If it's a human, it's okay as long as they've been given sacred gear, but as far as fantasy beings are concerned, it's a different story. When it comes to attracting fantasy beings, power as an explicit offer is necessary. So that would be your goal?" Satinel looked at the wall of the room. That place was decorated with a painting of a long black dragon that was like a snake. The dragon held its own tail in its mouth. Satinel says, "The longest living creatures in the world, dragons. Among them, who is said to be a dragon god, is one endowed with the power of infinity." The mages understood. Ouroboros, huh? The power of the serpent of Ouroboros. In fact, my target is Ophis, a legendary dragon. The dragon god considered the strongest in the world. The being who was the personification of infinity. Satinel had decided that the strongest dragon was his target. Walburga posed a question as she extended her hand to a fresco in the corner of the room. "By the way, what is the name we are giving this gathering of forces? Put a name on it, just call it what you want." One of the leading wizards sharply rejected the statement of the young Walburga. However, Walburga, not caring about anything, asked a very interesting question. But isn't something like this of considerable importance? Shouldn't we give it a name like those of the opposing powers? To this, Satinel responded, "If it's a name, I've been thinking about one." After a moment's pause, he said that name. "Khaos Brigade, I think that's what we should call our meeting. It all started from here." 4 days after Levinia woke up, 2 weeks after the battle in the forest, Draco was returning after another day of training with Rainier. Regardless of Levinia, who was unconscious, everyone was back to normal within days of returning from the forest. Draco was no exception. Indeed, after evolving, Draco had noticed how the limitations of his previous evolution had been lifted, and he could now begin to level them again. In fact, his abilities had risen once more during these 2 weeks. The special skills had moved up a level at the same time as they had evolved, as they were somehow passive skills that could not be moved up with practice. In reality, only the normal skills could be steadily upgraded. The rest needed to unlock some special action, or wait for evolution. Of the special skills, Sage had moved up to level 4. It was normal for this skill to move up as it evolved, and Draco couldn't remember right now if he had moved up with any special events. After evolving into Nephilim Dragon King, Flight, Holy Attribute, Darkness Attribute, and Senjutsu all went straight to max level. Apparently, once he had reached the level of a Dragon King, Draco no longer had any limits to improve on his Senjutsu. Presence detection and automatic HP recovery have been raised to levels 3 and 4 respectively, which is always appreciated. These are skills that you don't seem to notice, but they can be the key to evenly matched battles. Of normal skills, few things had changed. The vast majority of the skills had moved up a level, while Art of Human Transformation had moved up to the max level. Arrow Creation, which was already at level 9, had gone up to level 10, which is also the maximum level. The only normal skills that didn't level up with the evolution were Tuki and Stealth, skills that needed training and hours to level up. The rest was understandable that they would level up along with the evolution, but not these 2 skills. Title skills, neither had been affected by evolution. In other words, evolution and title skills were not related at all. Overall, as Draco expected, evolution had been very good. In other words, Azazel's mission had gone extremely well. Not only had Draco evolved, but he had advanced to almost half of this new evolution. His strength had nearly doubled, so he was very pleased. After returning to normal, Draco had returned to his usual routine. That is, he had retrained his Senjutsu and Tuki first thing in the morning. Previously, Draco had sat up in his bed when he only slept with Kuroka and trained in Senjutsu and Tuki until he finally reached that limit created by his previous evolution. Now, he couldn't use his bed for training because it was 100% occupied by girls. Draco had to do something to fix that, since it was starting to be annoying not to be able to have sex at night in his own bed. However, Draco now had a building exactly like his previous residence in the underworld. That is, he could now use his favorite place to train again. What was his favorite place? Obviously, it was the roof. This was a relaxing place for Draco, as everyone knew the importance Draco placed on these training sessions. Although he was not going to reproach anyone for being disturbed, Draco also made no secret of how upset he was about it. No one liked to see Draco angry. In the previous building in the underworld, Shuri had a small flower garden on the same roof. However, Shuri was no longer in this place, but there was still a flower garden. The person who cared for this flower garden was none other than Valerie. She didn't have much to do in this place, and she hadn't had much to do in her life either. When she wasn't studying with Levinia, she used to take care of the garden. It was usually in the evenings when Draco was away. Since she helped Gasper escape a few years ago, she was locked in a cell. It wasn't many days before her brother started experimenting on her and her Longinus. Her studies were totally neglected, so she had an education similar to that of Aquino or Issei, or even less. Draco realized this when he saw that Valerie was having trouble doing simple mathematical operations. Yes, although she had studied until she was 12 to 13 years old, she had spent about 4 or 3 years locked up in a cell. That, like it or not, takes its toll on the mind. Draco had offered her the option of going to Grigori to study alongside Aquino and Issei, who were of a similar level to her. She had refused, however, saying that she was not comfortable there, and had even shown a slightly hostile attitude toward Draco for saying so. Valerie knew of the reputation the Grigori had as researchers, so she probably had some traumas about such institutions. Or so Draco thought. Grigori wasn't the only option for Valerie to study, as there was also something called home study. Draco had offered this option to Valerie, and she had easily accepted. To Draco's surprise, she had even thanked him. Levinia found out that Valerie was going to study on practically the same day, and she offered to help Valerie with her studies. Not only did she find out, but Kuroka did as well, and immediately included Chiron in the curriculum. The mornings for the residents of the building were as follows. Draco, training. Kuroka, sleep. Mordred, sleep. Aquino, study at Grigori. Natsum, study at Grigori. Valerie, study at home. Chiron, studying at home. Levinia, Valerie and Chiron's teacher. She couldn't do that while unconscious, but she returned the teaching when she woke up. Valina, training in Grigori. Draco had made a lot of progress during these 2 weeks, both in Senjutsu and in Tuki. Since Draco had evolved into Nephilim Dragon King, the concept of Senjutsu seemed to have evolved. Perhaps this had something to do with the disappearance of the levels of the system. He did not know or really care. However, he seemed to have opened the door to a new world. What he was able to feel by focusing and entering the wonderful world known as Senjutsu was something not unlike what he felt before, but it was empowered many times over. Both the precision and the depth of what his senses were capable of grasping had been amplified to unsustainable levels. It was no lie that he had been partially overwhelmed the first time he had trained in this discipline. Draco had not noticed it in the battle with Augusta because of the adrenaline coursing through his veins at the time. Still, the same could not be said for using Senjutsu when he didn't have that adrenaline. Now, Draco felt that he could read the flow of life force at an almost atomic level. He did not have the same ability to control this flow of life force, however. That was what Draco was trying to improve upon while practicing Senjutsu. He had always thought that Tuki was the only thing he could take advantage of from Senjutsu and some other minor skills. However, Draco had realized that there was more to Senjutsu than Tuki itself. Draco practiced adopting a new attack in his skill set, taking advantage of his ability to read the flow of life force. He wanted to improve his control to such an extent that he could affect his opponent's life force with his attacks. Draco did not know if he would succeed with this or not, but at least he had to try. This did not mean he had given up on Tuki, far from it. In fact, this skill had risen to no less than 2 levels. 2 more levels in Senjutsu. That was an impressive increase in Draco's strength in just 2 weeks. When he used Tukey now, his physical attributes were up 60%. That was very OP. Draco, with his 775 points in strength, using Tukey would bring his total to 1240 points, which was twice as many as he had using Tukey before he evolved. Furthermore, if we consider Draco before he came to Grigori on Tiamat's recommendation, the current Draco was 12 times more powerful. 12 times. It seemed like getting to Grigori was a good decision. Draco could not be more grateful to Tiamat. Tiamat's blue hair and eyes flashed through Draco's mind as he remembered her. What was she doing right now? Draco really missed her. She was, after all, the first woman he had been attracted to since he had come into this world. Maybe I should go visit her before I go to Naciverse? That's what Draco was wondering as he descended the floors of the building. Draco had already finished his morning training, but there was still some time before he had to start preparing the meal. Yes, Draco was still preparing food for everyone. It was strange that he still did not have a cooking skill in the system, but it seemed that it only recorded skills that aided in combat or something similar. Since there was still some time left before he could begin cooking, Draco decided to take a hot bath to relax. Thus, he went directly down to the underground floors. Once the entire bath was prepared, Draco immersed himself in the onsen, especially when he had 10 fate points, of which he only wanted to keep 5 or 6. In other words, it's gotcha time. In case you don't remember, Draco had 4 or 5 fate points saved for when he traveled to Naciverse. The rest of the fate points come from the Slashdog members added to Akatsuki. Now, Draco's question was what should he spend the fate points on? Considering that he would need 2 fate points to travel between worlds, he had another 6 and used ones. Once again, Draco planned to use fate points to turn at least 4 people into servants. This left only 2 more fate points to use. Since Draco did not want to invoke another servant at this time, it would make sense to spend 1 fate point on a noble phantasm and 1 on a fate skill. And that's what Draco was going to do. Sage, I want to spend a fate point to get a fate skill. Are you sure? Of course. 1 fate point used, getting fate skill. 3, 2, 1. Fate skill. Blessing of martial arts, say obtained. Draco's lips curved. An A-rank skill was always a good thing, and the name of this skill caught his eye. Martial arts. This was one of the disciplines in which Draco failed. Although Draco was not useless in hand-to-hand combat, it could be said that he fought more with his instincts than with techniques. There was no problem because until now, he had not had the need to make use of hand-to-hand combat. In fact, he couldn't remember a time when he had had a fight in this way. However, he knew that even his arrows had a limit. There would always be the armor that his arrows could not penetrate, or enemies fast enough to dodge his arrows. As always, Draco asked Sage for a full description of the skill. Blessing of Martial Arts is a skill where Rama, the protagonist of the Ramayana, one of the 2 major epic poems from India, whose fate is to defeat Demon King Ravana, not only displays excellence in swordsmanship, but with all forms of martial arts as well. Also, due to this, he can bring out his prided spear and bow with powers close to a noble phantasm while a saber. As usual, Sage had given a good explanation. Apparently, it seemed that this skill belonged to a servant of the saber class, Rama. Draco had some idea who Rama was, as he had studied Hindu mythology extensively. He was the reincarnation of Vishnu, or something like that. Agni Gandiva and Blessing of Martial Arts came from Hindu mythology, which added 2 to Draco's FS/MP number coming from this mythology. At the same time, this made it even with the 2 from Celtic mythology and those from Greek mythology. Draco immediately decided to give himself that skill. He didn't have to think too much about it. This was something he needed. The ideal right now would be to pull a sword out of the crook. With that, this skill could be used to its fullest. Of course, this might not be so. We all know how random the axe is, especially in this kind of novels XD. Still, Draco was hoping that luck would go with him. He was still the protagonist of his own story, and all protagonists need plot armor. Draco even thought that the old man, who had been quiet for a long time, could hear his thoughts so that he could affect the face and get a good sword. Draco did not ask for much. An Arondite or a Balmung were fine. He did not even ask for an Excalibur Proto or EA. Without wasting much time, he asked the system to spend a fate point. 1 fate point use, getting Noble Phantasm. 3, 2, 1. Noble Phantasm, Levatin. The sword akin to the Son of Calamity. A brilliant sword appeared in front of Draco at the same time as the draw ended. The eyes of the dragon were fixed on the sword, absorbed in the beauty it radiated. A mixture of gold, red, and black made up the colors of this sword. A striking pattern of symbols, which Draco could not recognize or perhaps did not make any sense, ran down the sword from the handle to virtually the tip of the blade. Draco's hand grabbed the sword naturally, and it seemed to be tailor-made for him. The massive amount of magical power the blade emitted did not overwhelm Draco. Still, it felt like a warm summer breeze brushing against his skin. With his sword in hand, Draco felt invincible. It seemed that the old man had truly heard Draco's words, giving him an extremely powerful blade. Alert! Alert! You're in danger! You're in danger! Draco was surprised when he heard Sage's voice in his head. This was the first time he had ever received a message of this kind. What's going on? Emergency situation. User is in danger of instant death. What's going on? Activating emergency protocol. A series of notifications appeared in Draco's mind. Sage has permission to control the system. Sage has permission to spend fate points. Sage is allowed to buy a fate skill. Sage is allowed to downgrade a Noble Phantasm to a fate skill. Sage degrades Noble Phantasm, branch destruction EX, to fate skill branch destruction A++. Draco was freaking out as the notices came one after another. What was going on? Why was he in danger? Emergency situation ended. Emergency protocol deactivated. Sage, I want explanations for everything that happened. Draco was quite serious about this matter. It was the first time the system was out of control. You nearly died from the high temperatures emitted by Levinia. If I had acted a few seconds later, all your internal organs would have evaporated. Draco's eyes shrank in fear for a moment. He firmly believed in Sage's words, so he did not doubt the veracity of what he had reported. This sword, what's the temperature it's emitting so it can kill him in just seconds? It had not even been 5 seconds since the blade had been summoned and Draco had nearly died, though he had not felt anything dangerous. The sword is no longer dangerous to you, although I recommend you control its temperature. Control the temperature? What was I talking about? Show me all the information about this sword. Levatin. The sword akin to the Son of Calamity is Searcher's Noble Phantasm, the syncretism of his Sword of Flame, Freyr's Sword of the Sun, and Loki's weapon. It's a divine construct forged by the planet that equals the Holy Spear, Rongaminiad, and the manifestation of multiple malignant authorities. It's a weapon meant to tear the texture known as the Age of Gods from the planet's surface. It carries a massive amount of magical energy, which projects a heat exceeding 4 million degrees Celsius, which is impossible on Earth. Furthermore, it has priority against life forms. As such, it is capable of destroying any living being with a form, even gods from the Age of Gods. With it, Surtur was able to kill the Norse gods, Loki, and the other kings of the giants. Servants are some of the only beings that have some resistance to the sword, as they are not proper life and are merely ether in the form of past individuals. Due to being a legendary sword, it is covered with 9 seals and is being safeguarded by Searcher's wife Sinmara. When activated, the sword is able to unleash an anti-divine, anti-life attack. What monstrosity is this sword? That's what Draco was wondering. Heat exceeding 4 million degrees Celsius. Even with all of Draco's defenses and 50% fire mitigation, it was more than reasonable for him to end up dying within seconds. Draco was content with a decent sword, not a sword that is literally anti-life. Immediately, Draco controlled the weapon to lower its temperature. Of the 4 million, Draco adjusted it to an average temperature. Only now, Draco could see the destruction he had created in the room. All the water in the bath had evaporated, and the walls were beginning to melt. Yes, the room was melting. Draco was wiping off some cold sweat when he realized there was one more detail on the blade. Like Golden Drive, the sword had a special attack. Loptra Legjarn, Shine brighter than the sun, O sword of flame, is the anti-world attack of Searcher's sword. Levatin turned into a noble phantasm. It's the flame of the end that signals the apocalypse. An anti-divine, anti-life, anti-world special attack capable of reducing all of the Scandinavian world to cinders in a single blow. After increasing his strength by consuming Fenrir in the Norse Lost Belt, Surtur managed to destroy the 9 realms that made up the Scandinavian world and set the planet aflame using his sword. Without a doubt, this sword had become Draco's strongest noble phantasm. Perhaps the only one who can surpass it in the future will be Aegis, but there is still a long way to go. We're talking about a noble phantasm at the level of Rangamenyad. It's the fucking flame that will start the apocalypse according to Norse mythology. Could Draco have asked for a better noble phantasm? Almost certainly not. Now, Draco had a way of dealing with EA at Naciverse. In fact, he had no intention of fighting the Gilgamesh directly, as a victory would be virtually impossible. But having a trump card that matches his is always good. The walls, floor, and ceiling of the room almost completely melted in the few seconds that Draco's new sword, Levatin, was emitting that excessive amount of heat. Both Mordred and Kuroka had sensed this change in temperature, but Draco had already spoken to them mentally. Once they had calmed down, they continued to do what they were doing, sleeping, but Draco could not tell them all that nothing had really happened. At least, of all those in the house at this time, one person had noticed. This person was the same one that Draco had detected descending quickly to the bathroom floor, and it was the same one that had created the ice that was beginning to appear on the bathroom walls. Dearest, the only one who could use the ice at this level was none other than Levinia. The bathroom door opened wide, and the young blonde girl rushed in. Behind her was an ice doll, reduced in size, who was taking care of freezing the walls. Levinia breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Draco was fine. "Are you all right?" She reached out and placed her hands on Draco's chest. She then moved them around his body to check his condition. Levinia was a girl who was ashamed of holding hands together with Draco in public, but she did not do so when she was seen naked or when she saw Draco naked. Such was Lavinia's personality, the personality that had made Draco fall in love. Draco sighed helplessly when he saw what she was doing, though a smile took form on his lips. "I'm perfectly fine, you don't have to worry." Draco gently stroked Lavinia's silky blonde hair. At the same time, Lavinia's hand reached out to Draco's bottom. Without hesitation, she squeezed his little dragon. Lavinia blushed, though it is not known whether it was the caress of Draco or the touch of the little dragon, probably a mixture of the two. Draco felt Lavinia's soft touch on his cock, and at the same time saw the slightly embarrassed expression on her face. Both things ended up exciting him, and everyone knows what happens when a man gets excited. From his flaccid state of 6.7 inches, he quickly went to his 10.2 inches of erect state. And I just realized that I've never said how big the little dragon really is, smiley face. There was no way Lavinia wouldn't notice the change in state. A few months earlier, she would have completely ignored this, and even asked out of curiosity. However, she already understood a little more about this whole issue of sexuality. That's why her reaction was not as innocent as might be expected of her. Lavinia had some rather strange values for shame. You could never tell whether she was going to be embarrassed or not. Lavinia felt Draco's cock get big in her hands and slowly swallowed saliva. Even she couldn't believe how excited she was getting. She could feel her panties starting to get wet. Was this a natural reaction of her body? Instinctively, Lavinia began to slowly caress Draco's limb. From top to bottom, from bottom to top. She repeated the movement continuously. Draco was surprised. He didn't expect the situation to end this way, although it was not as if he was going to complain about what was happening. "Lavinia," Draco grunted slightly as he felt the sweet touch of Lavinia's fingers. There was no point in hiding that the service he was receiving from his girlfriend was pleasant, so Draco was not going to show something he was not feeling. On the contrary, Draco was one of those who thought it best to show his loved ones how he was feeling at each moment, and that included sex. Slowly, the faces of the two drew closer together, until both lips barely parted. At the same time, Draco reached beneath Lavinia's fine nightgown and thrust his other hand into her panties. Levinia opened her mouth slightly, hoping and praying that Draco's tongue would penetrate it. Our young dragon did not keep his beloved waiting, and sealed Lavinia's lips with his own. Both lovers' hands were working at the same time as their tongues. As Draco invaded Lavinia's mouth, desperately trying to match Draco's pace, forcing her to take a defensive stance due to the blonde's inexperience, Draco's hands moved in completely opposite directions. His left hand went through Lavinia's shirt, which belonged to Draco, so it was a little big and acted as a nightgown, and went up to her stomach. He enjoyed Lavinia's flat stomach slowly until he finally reached one of the mounds hanging from her chest. Without hesitation, he grabbed Lavinia's tit with a little force, causing a groan to come from her mouth. His right hand, on the other hand, went down her panties and soon found Lavinia's lower lips. As his tongue had done with her upper lips, Draco's index finger decided to investigate what those lips were hiding once more. Before he even got inside, Draco could already feel how wet Levinia was. Thanks to this unexpected or expected lubricant, the index finger could easily enter Lavinia's interior. No! Levinia groaned with difficulty as she felt Draco's finger invade her. Her body trembled slightly from the double stimulus Draco provoked by attacking two of her sensitive areas. As soon as he entered, Draco felt the vaginal walls squeeze into that finger. As one would expect from a virgin, her insides were very narrow. Draco felt as if Lavinia's pussy wanted to absorb his finger. Lavinia's love juices were beginning to overflow, and Draco had not even begun to move his finger. She was really sensitive. Draco started moving his finger, stimulating Lavinia's insides. With his other hand, he began to play with the nipple that was already completely erect. The stimulation was too much for Levinia, who had to finish the kiss by force because she was starting to get short of breath. The pleasure Draco was giving her meant that Levinia had to concentrate in order to breathe. During all this time, Levinia had not stopped caressing Draco's penis. With her free hand, she stroked Draco's bare, muscular chest. In the short interval that Levinia was on the alert, Draco felt the arrival of a powerful presence in front of the building. Soon he relaxed as he felt it was a familiar presence to him. It seemed the time had come. He was going to send a mental message to his two servants, but Kuroka had already gone back to sleep. It hadn't even been 2 minutes since he had woken up. Draco mentally messaged Mordred, told her to come out and meet the guest. Afterwards, he continued his work with Levinia. Mordred had risen earlier than usual that day. Though she used to sleep a great deal since she had nothing to do, she was not a natural sleeper like Kuroka. Previously, she had trained Chiron in the mornings. But now, the little Nekashu used those hours to study with Valerie. When she had nothing to do, Mordred liked to watch Levinia teach Chiron and Valerie. Mordred knew that this was not her timeline, and knowledge was just as important as the skill with the sword. That's why she didn't complain when she heard that Chiron was going to study in the mornings. Seeing the concentrated faces of Chiron and Valerie as Levinia taught them this knowledge had become Mordred's first source of entertainment in the mornings. Mordred had also tried to study, but books aren't meant for Mordred. This morning, Mordred was up early. She was not a typical servant. Since she had obtained a new body thanks to Draco, she had to eat like any other living being. After breakfast, she went to watch Chiron and Valerie study. These two girls were the two people closest to Mordred, not counting Draco and Kuroka. Levinia was teaching them mathematics this morning. As the time to finish morning school approached, Mordred felt that source of intense power coming from the bathrooms on the lower floors. It was impossible for her not to feel that warm power that obviously came from a noble phantasm. She was going to go investigate, but a message from Draco calmed her down. After all, this was nothing more than something her master had done. Mordred was already accustomed to extraordinary events occurring around him. However, it was not the same for everyone else. "What is it, Lavinia-sensei? You look very pale," Chiron asked when she saw Lavinia's pale face. Valerie had a face that showed concern, but she did not say a word. It seemed that neither of the two girls had realized what was happening. They had not yet reached that level. "I feel a bit sick. I'm going to the bathroom for a moment. I'll be right back." After saying that, Levinia left the room in a hurry. Valerie and Chiron exchanged looks of confusion and concern, while Mordred simply shrugged. Seeing the girls' state of worry, Mordred approached them and stroked their hair with a little force. "It's okay. You don't have to worry. Why don't you take the opportunity to finish your homework now?" Mordred wasn't very good at calming someone down or getting them to relax. She was awful. So this was her attempt to get them to think about something else. Chiron believed everything her teacher said, so she soon smiled and finished the task Levinia had left them. Valerie, however, was not as innocent as Chiron, and she had a tendency to doubt people more. No one could blame her for this, given her past experiences. But since she couldn't do anything even if something happened, she stopped thinking about it and concentrated on finishing her homework. Mordred was not the most attentive person, so she did not notice these little details. She saw that the two girls were doing the exercises and nodded with a smile on her face. A few minutes later, she noticed a powerful presence approaching the building. A few seconds later, Draco told her to come out and greet the guest. "I'll be right back, girls. I have something to do." Mordred left the room after warning the girls and went to meet this person. When Mordred left, Valerie stared at Chiron. For the little Nekashu, it wasn't a lie to say that a vampire staring at you was scaring her a little. At least she was emitting no hostility or anything like that. "Do I have something on my face?" Chiron couldn't help but ask. "Don't you think there's something strange going on today?" Valerie didn't answer the question, which was obviously ironic, and asked Chiron something else back. "I don't think so. Is something wrong?" Valerie didn't reply and just looked away as she fell into her thoughts. A few seconds later, she stood up and said with determination, "First Levinia, and then Mordred. Something is happening today. We must investigate." Chiron might be more excited if Valerie put some feeling into her voice. As always, the vampire kept her face and voice unexpressed. "Come on." Valerie didn't hesitate to leave the room. Chiron didn't know what to do for a few seconds until she finally came to her senses and ran after Valerie. "Valerie said, wait." "Shoo, we're gonna get caught." Chiron met with Valerie's dry response. The secret vampire and Nekashu investigation began here. Mordred left the room and headed for the entrance to the house, where this person Draco had warned of was waiting. Mordred did not need Draco's warning to notice this person. It was an aura she had sensed before, or at least it was very similar. It was the aura of Talia Grace, the girl who had accompanied them into the forest. No, it wasn't Talia. This person had an even more powerful aura than the young huntress. Mordred opened the door and found herself with proud, cold, dark brown eyes. In front of Mordred appeared a tall beauty, taller than her at least. Remember that Mordred is less than 160 centimeters tall, with coppery skin. She had an elegant posture, and there was no doubt that she was wonderfully beautiful. She was wearing the same clothes as Talia, so Mordred connected two and figured that the two must be allies in some way. That is, she was one of Artemis' hunters. "Who are you?" Just because she was Talia's ally didn't mean Mordred was going to let his guard down around a powerful person, especially when she hadn't confirmed this person's identity. With her silver tiara and her haughty expression, the girl looked like royalty. Mordred was also part of a royal family, but she did not exude this unique aura of the highest nobility. "My name is Zoe Nightshade, the lieutenant of Artemis. I am seeking the dragon Draco at the request of my goddess. May I speak with him?" Mordred was silent for a few moments, when Zoe was beginning to feel uncomfortable. Was she being judged at this time? Not really. Mordred was having a mental communication right now, in which Draco was briefly detailing the important activity he is doing right now with Levinia. This caused her cheeks to blush wildly, as Emo-chan was not prepared for this. Zoe, on the other hand, did not know what to think. This girl had blushed as she stared at her, and had finally dodged her gaze. Was she one of those girls who like girls over guys? "All right, Draco has given you permission to enter. You're gonna have to wait a little while since he's busy." Zoe wondered what Draco was doing right now that was more important than receiving the right hand of the goddess Artemis. In the end, she said nothing and followed Mordred into the room. Zoe analyzed Mordred and could not help but be surprised by how strong this girl seemed. She must have been the girl Talia had reported, as the characteristics matched. Strong. She was a strong woman. Zoe wasn't sure which one of them would win if a fight broke out between them. Perhaps she needed to make use of her taboo lineage to defeat Mordred. Mordred and Zoe ended up in the first-floor living room, each sitting on a different couch. They were both silent, each thinking about something different. Zoe was thinking of asking Mordred if she was a virgin, so she could offer her a chance to join Artemis Hunters. Such a strong girl would make an excellent addition to the group, much better than a male dragon. Seriously, what was Artemis thinking to invite Draco to join the group? At that moment, Zoe went on alert when she sensed another powerful aura. This one was slightly less than Mordred's, but that didn't take away from the fact that the person emitting such an aura was powerful. "It's time to eat, nya." A girl in a thin nightgown came into the room as she was waking up. With her 2 cat ears and the 4 tails coming out of the nightie from behind, Zoe identified this girl as a Yukai. This girl was probably close to the level of Sun Wukong himself. When had such a powerful Yukai ever appeared? Kuroka's eyes were half closed in sleep, but she opened them wide when she realized that Draco had not made the meal. She ignored Zoe completely when she began using Senjutsu to seek out Draco's presence, finding him successfully playing with Levinia. That idiot. It's okay to have fun and sex games with Levinia, but you can't forget to make my food. Kuroka was genuinely angry, and it was not because Draco was having an intimate moment with Levinia. It was because he hadn't prepared the meal for Kuroka, and she was hungry. Zoe clenched her fists tightly and bit her lip when she heard Kuroka. So Draco was having sex while he made Artemis Lieutenant wait. Meanwhile, watching from the corridor and well-hidden, Chiron and Valerie observed the situation. "I'm so sorry about Draco and Isan. Kurokane-sama is very scary when she gets angry." Valerie nodded her head seriously. The expression Kuroka was making at this point was definitely scary. But the vamp not only noticed Kuroka, but also Zoe. She wondered who this girl was who had invited herself to Draco's house, and who had requested that Mordred come out to meet her. "What are you girls doing here?" Chiron and Valerie were startled when they heard Draco's voice from behind them. "D. Draco." Chiron waved with a certain nervousness. Valerie only kept her eyes serious as she looked at Draco. It seemed they had been captured in this secret investigation. "So you guys are hungry too, huh?" "Sorry, I haven't had time to cook since I've been busy with other things." Draco apologized to the girls. Draco would never have thought the 2 girls were conducting a secret investigation, although it wasn't so secret anymore. It had taken Draco so short a time to get upstairs as he had received a couple of mental cries from Kuroka. The surprise of the first scream had caused him to run straight away. Fortunately, Levinia had climaxed at that very moment as well. "We're home now." The elevator opened, and 3 girls got out of it. They were none other than Natsum, Valina, and Aquino, who had arrived after studying at Grigori in the morning. "Welcome." Draco welcomed them with a smile. The girls smiled back at him. "I'm sorry, girls. I didn't have time to cook today, so we're going to eat ramen. Is that okay?" Draco would rather take his time preparing a good meal for everyone. However, that seemed impossible at the moment. Already Draco could see Kuroka kicking the floor in frustration and anger at not being able to eat. She was looking at Draco with swollen cheeks. She was so cute. Next to Draco, Valina's eyes lit up when she heard they were going to eat ramen. It had been a long time since they had eaten ramen at home, not to mention when she would sneak into the store and shop for herself. Luckily, Draco hadn't heard about their ramen-eating escapes. As strict as he was about everyone's diet, Valina was going to get a good scolding if this got back to the dragon's ears. Draco turned and looked at Lucifer's descendant. "Hey, Valina, I need your help." "Yes." Valina looked at Draco curiously. "You are the ramen expert. Why don't you prepare the food while I talk to a guest? I am sure that the ramen will taste much better if you are the one who prepares it." Faced with Draco's expectation, she did not hesitate to respond. "You sure know how to measure your words well, Draco big bro. No one doubts that what this white dragon empress does is the best of the best. Today's meal will live up to my great name." Draco smiled at Valina's enthusiasm. When she activated that strange way of speaking, it meant that she was excited and enthusiastic. A powerful battle aura haunted Valina as she entered the kitchen. She completely ignored Zoe as she mumbled words that would scare more than one. Well, girls, I have some business to discuss with our guest. Why don't you go set the table for lunch? Draco suggested. That's when Natsum and Aquino, the only two with Valina who hadn't seen Zoe, realized there was a guest in the house. Yeah, why not? Natsum understood that Draco had something important to discuss with this woman, so she grabbed Aquino's hand and went after Valina. The message was not just for the two of them, but for all the girls. Mordred and Kuroka seemed hesitant, but Draco convinced them by mental messages. Once all the girls were gone, Draco was left alone with this woman he had never met. Draco felt that her aura was similar to that of Talia and Artemis, although it was closer to the latter. She lacked that divine aura that the demigoddess and goddess had, but gave off a far more titanic one. She was definitely stronger than Talia and was quite close to Kuroka and Mordred. Without hesitation, Draco used her status inspection. Status inspection. Zoe Nightshade. Race, Nymph, Hesperid/Huntress. HP, 3551/3551. MP, 2901. Strength, 1623. Defense, 1459. Magic, 2135. Agility, 3123. Abilities: Zoolingualism, Battle Prowess, Animal Communication, Huntress Immortality, Archery. She was definitely stronger than Talia Grace, and she could even put up a good fight with Mordred and Kuroka. Until now, Draco had encountered people who had all their statistics hidden, but it was the first time he had seen someone who had only partially hidden them. That was why Draco did not dare estimate the true strength of the girl in front of him. Draco sat down in front of Zoe and spoke politely to her. "May I know the name of this beautiful lady?" Zoe had already seen Draco once, but he hadn't seen her. Artemis Lieutenant had been left out of that meeting between Draco and the goddess. That's why Draco didn't recognize her. "My name is Zoe. I am Artemis Lieutenant." The girl showed up again. Draco was not surprised to hear Zoe's identity, as it was obvious that such a powerful woman would have an important position within Artemis Group. He would have underestimated the goddess if Zoe was just one of the group, someone of no real importance. "My name is Draco, although I guess you know that already." "Well, what is Artemis Lieutenant doing here?" "My goddess requires your presence. Tomorrow morning you will come with our group." Draco raised an eyebrow unconsciously. This proposal was quite interesting. Although he had barely had a conversation with Artemis, she did not seem to be the type to make such dominant requests. Draco was quick to grasp the situation. He would be utterly useless if he did not. Zoe was a member of the Huntress group and had a very high position in it. It would not be uncommon for her to have hostility towards men, who were most of the reason why quite a few Huntresses left the team over the years. She may have had her own personal problems with men. Draco felt Zoe was watching him with an irritated look. It was obvious she was unhappy about having to invite him to join the group. She seemed to disagree with Artemis' decision, but had accepted it anyway. Coming here in person to inform Draco was a great show of loyalty to the goddess. "All right, I'll go with you tomorrow." Draco figured out why Artemis wanted to talk to him, so he didn't hesitate to agree. Draco stood up from his seat and extended his hand to Zoe. "Do you want to eat with us? We have ramen to eat." "Umph." She slapped Draco's hand away and stood up on her own. Zoe went directly to the exit of the house, and only turned around when she had set foot out of the house. "At 8 o'clock in the morning I'll be waiting for you. I won't waste another minute of my time." After leaving those words, she left the house. A few seconds later, and Draco could no longer feel Zoe's presence. What a cold woman. That's what it takes to be a virgin for thousands of years, I guess. Draco shrugged after closing the door. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a girl with blonde hair walking down the hallway. Levinia had recovered from her previous intense activity. "Yo, let's eat." "Valina has made ramen." Levinia frowned when she heard that there was ramen to eat, but relaxed and smiled sweetly when she heard the second part. "Vachan cook? I have to make sure I eat at least 2 plates." It was 7:30 a.m. the next day. Draco had gotten up a couple of hours earlier to train but had already taken a shower and was currently finishing breakfast. He had arranged to meet Zoe at 8 a.m. and Draco was one of those who didn't like to keep others waiting. The worst thing anyone can do is keep someone waiting. Draco hated people who were always late. If you were meeting someone at 8 a.m., you couldn't be late for 8:05 a.m. That was rude. Draco dressed in a thin white shirt, combined with jeans and comfortable shoes. This time, he did not have to act as Akatsuki's leader or anything like that, nor did he have to train Rainier. That's why he could choose more casual clothes. 5 minutes before the hour was up, Draco stepped out the door. If Draco hadn't misjudged Zoe, she should have arrived exactly at the time she was supposed to meet Draco. It's strange to see you up so early. Draco didn't even turn around when two people left the house. I couldn't sleep well, yeah. Without Master at home, it feels a little weird. The two girls who left were Draco's two servants, Mordred and Kuroka. Draco turned to face them. They both wore clothes that characterized them. Well, is there anything you need? Mordred turned her head to the side, avoiding Draco's gaze, while Kuroka threw herself into his embrace. Kuroka applied all the strength she could in her arms, even if Draco barely noticed, to express her feelings in the most convincing manner possible. I don't want you to leave, the Nekasha muttered. Kuroka could not imagine a life without Draco. She had been living with him for 2 years, day after day. She was unable to imagine a life without Draco. He was the one who had pulled her out of that hell, who had prevented Chiron from going through the same hell as Kuroka. He had given her a home and new family. He had given her strength to fight and protect her beloved younger sister, even though she had not yet had the chance to use it. Draco was Kuroka's world. Draco spoke to the girls the day before after having the conversation with Zoe, and told them of the possibility that this journey would last more than a few days. Artemis required their presence, and Draco suspected it was not just to formally join her group. A short trip to Japan by the goddess to perform this ritual of being accepted into the group was all that was needed if Artemis was to do just that. It was not difficult for Draco to assume that Artemis needed him for something else. I don't know how long I'll be gone, Kuroka, but I promise I'll try to get back as soon as possible. Draco tried to calm Kuroka. She hesitated, but finally broke away from Draco and nodded. Be careful, he said gently. I'll be. Kuroka stepped back, and Draco laid eyes on the other girl who had come out to see him off. Mordred, his first servant. Mordred seemed to be doubting something, and it seemed that she had finally gathered enough determination to look at Draco and speak. I will accompany you. Impossible. Draco had no hesitation in rejecting Mordred's request. But I am your servant. My duty is to accompany you and fight by your side. Draco shook his head. No matter what Mordred had to say, Draco wasn't going to take her with him. This isn't that war, Mordred. You don't have to worry. There are few things in this world capable of defeating Artemis and her hunters. Not only that, but I'm no longer that little dragon incapable of doing anything. Mordred bit her lip and bent her head, unsure how to continue. Her instincts told her that this journey Draco was about to embark upon was not going to be as simple as she first saw it. Mordred felt that Draco might be in danger if he accompanied Artemis. As she bit her lips, a pair of male arms surrounded her. Draco embraced her and drew her to his chest, burying her in a warm embrace. Mordred remembered when she was first summoned, when Draco gave her this new life. The man who was now far taller than she was then was 6 inches shorter. Yes, what he had said before was true. Draco is no longer that feeble little dragon from back then. He had grown up to be someone she could trust. Mordred hugged Draco back as a smile formed on her lips. Yes, it was not bad to be able to trust someone like that. Well, it's time to go. Isn't it, Zoe? Don't say my name so casually. Call me Lieutenant. Draco released Mordred's embrace, and she parted, albeit reluctantly, and turned in the opposite direction. As if she had appeared out of nowhere, Zoe was standing across the street. Just as Draco expected, the lieutenant had arrived at the exact time. While I'm off, Draco hugged Mordred again and shared a slightly too long kiss with Kuroka before leaving with Zoe. This did not seem to be to Zoe's liking, and it was evident from the disgusted look on her face. Well, it wasn't like Draco cared. If Draco was sincere, he didn't expect Zoe to take him to this place. What are we doing at the airport? Draco asked out of sheer curiosity. However, Zoe answered quite fiercely. We're going to travel to another continent. What more do you want? Draco felt something suspicious was going on here. Rarely did members of the supernatural world use human means to travel. Maybe. You don't know how to make a teleportation circle? Shut up! Zoe screamed as she blushed. So Draco's suspicion was right. Apparently, although Zoe's magic power was quite high, she didn't even know how to use basic transport magic. You don't have to be ashamed of that. You know, even though I'm a dragon, I still don't know how to use the Dragon Gate. Tiamat wanted to teach me how to use it, but I think I was still too weak at the time. I didn't ask for your comfort. Zoe responded to Draco's attempt to comfort her in a cold voice, though he could see that she was grateful at heart. She was not so surprised to hear the name Tiamat, as Artemis had mentioned it when speaking of Draco earlier. Speaking of the Dragon Gate, Draco remembered that now was the time to learn about this method of transportation. It was the primary method of transportation for high-level dragons, so he needed to learn about it. As they entered the airport, Draco and Zoe kept quiet almost all the way. In the end, Draco had to talk. Where are we going? United States? Zoe's response was still just as cold. Why are we going to America? To Draco's question, Zoe gave him a strange look. Don't you know? Is there anything special I should know? Zoe slowed down and looked at Draco as if he really was a freak. Sigh, you don't really seem to know anything. It's a bit of a long story, so I'd better tell you inside the plane. Draco nodded, and the two continued on their way to the plane. Not long after, Draco and Zoe arrived at the plane, their destination Maine. Once inside the plane, Zoe and Draco sat in the back of it. Unfortunately for Zoe, since she didn't want to be so close to Draco. Now, she had to endure 12 hours at the side of a boy, which she didn't like at all. Draco didn't care. In fact, it was quite nice to be around a beautiful woman like Zoe. But now Draco was interested in something else. Why was America so important? Zoe had even looked at him funny about this. Hey, tell me about America. Why is it so important? Zoe gave Draco a strange look again. She really couldn't believe that Tiamat hadn't taught Draco anything about Western civilization. This is a bit complicated to explain, and you may not understand it very well at first. Draco shrugged. Never mind, we have a 12-hour flight to explain. Zoe's forehead wrinkled with irritation at the thought of spending 12 hours with a womanizer. In the mythologies that originated in Western Europe in the past, especially Greco-Latin and Nordic, there is an effect called Western civilization that affects both mythologies and mortals. Western civilization effect. This was something Draco had never heard of, probably because all DxD is focused on Japan and barely reaches Romania in one volume. European mythologies hardly matter. It's true that the gods appear throughout the novel, but not places like Mount Olympus and Asgard. I'm going to explain it to you in simple words. What is known as Western civilization is a living force, a collective consciousness that has burned for thousands of years. The gods are part of that. A fire burned in Greece. The heart of that flame moved to Rome, and so did the gods. Wherever that flame is brightest, the gods will move there. Right now, they're in the United States. Look at their symbol, the eagle of Zeus. Look at the statue of Prometheus at Rockefeller Center. Like it or not, the United States is now the heart of the most powerful flame in the West. So Olympus is here. Zoe's words were powerful, making an impact on Draco. After all, what she was saying made sense. Why were the Roman gods the same as the Greeks, but with different names? It was because they had moved to where that flame was most powerful. The flame that Zoe talks about is not something that really exists, but an expression for the most powerful human kingdom/country/empire of the moment. And without a doubt, the United States is the most powerful country in the world. Zoe explained a little more to Draco about the concept of Western civilization. Western civilization is a metaphysical force that moves with the flow of civilization. It is the pure essence of humanity's culture and connects everything that constitutes the collective spirit of humanity and civilization. This force moves with the center of human prosperity and influence, and was originally founded in Greece. And let's remember that although the Greeks were not the first gods in history, they are the first to be born in the western side of Europe. or so I believe, correct me if I am wrong. From there, it was carried by Zephyros, the western wind in Greek mythology, to Rome. Then it traveled through Europe, stopping in Germany, Nordic gods, France, Spain, and finally ending up in Britain for a while. The current center of the flame has been in the United States since 1860, precisely in New York City, where an entrance to Olympus is located on the Empire State Building. Olympus is a different realm from the human world, so its entrance can change without any problem. The fact that one of the entrances to Olympus is located in the United States does not mean that all the heritage of Greek mythology found in Greece is useless. On the contrary, Greece will always be more important for this mythology than any other place. Still, the Olympians are strongly connected to Western civilization, as they are both its source and its embodiment. This connection had a profound effect on the gods and mortal civilization. If Western civilization declined, the gods would be severely weakened. If the Olympic order was overthrown, then human civilization would fall apart at the seams, degenerating into chaos. Chaos. The plane finally landed at an airport in Maine, and Zoe and Draco got out of it. "Let's go, my lady, and the rest of my mates are waiting." Without saying anything else, Zoe started running at extremely high speeds. Fortunately for Draco, he wasn't the little dragon he used to be. Now his speed was his strongest point while he was in human form, but Zoe's speed was much higher than Draco's. So even when he was using his 2-key, Draco was still slower than Zoe. In the end, Draco gave up trying to run at the same speed as Zoe and pulled out his main motion tool. Golden Drive, his motion-type noble phantasm, appeared in front of him, and Draco didn't hesitate to get on and accelerate. Zoe, who was running faster than Draco on purpose, though always keeping a distance not too far away so as not to have to stay close to him for too long, saw a 2-wheeled vehicle approaching her quickly. "What's going on? Are you surprised?" More shocked was Zoe when she saw Draco driving this modern 2-wheeled vehicle. If she wasn't mistaken, this should be what humans call a motorcycle. "I would never have thought that a human invention could reach my speed on land." Zoe's words were sincere. Even if she wasn't the fastest in the world, she was in the top 100 without a doubt. "Oh, this is not a human invention, but something much more special." Zoe ignored Draco's mysterious explanation and continued running. Now that she knew Draco could maintain this speed, she could run without limitation. Seeing Zoe accelerate, Draco did not hesitate to follow her quickly. It was true that Zoe was fast, but Golden Drive had a top speed of 2,500 kilometers per hour. Most planes were only half as fast as Draco's special vehicle. "Hey, Lieutenant, don't you want to ride here with me? We'll be there sooner. I assure you, in your dreams." "TCT, you can't be this cold to me, Lieutenant. Aren't we going to be partners from now on? You got to think about teamwork, you know? Cooperation." Zoe gritted her teeth in anger. Draco was obviously bothering her on purpose. He was making her angry. What cooperation? What teamwork? Artemis' agreement with Draco was that he would be part of the group, including receiving Artemis' blessing that had never been given to a man in exchange for occasional help with her and her group of hunters. In other words, Draco was not going to team up with them. He was more of a helper than anything else. But Zoe couldn't say anything right now. They needed Draco's help for the hunt they were about to start. "Just shut up and follow me." Draco expected some cooler response, as Zoe usually did, but he didn't give it much thought either. In the end, Draco fell silent and followed Zoe to the destination. Zoe and Draco soon arrived at the place where Artemis and her hunters were residing. In one of the natural areas, the base of a mountain, a camp had been set up. Draco could sense several presences inside, including those of Artemis and Talia Grace. As expected of the goddess Artemis, she did not rest in a 5-star hotel or anything like that. "Here we are." Draco did not need Zoe's warning to realize this, but he nodded anyway. He followed her into the camp, and there he saw a large number of girls of various ages. The youngest seemed to be about 10 years old, while the oldest did not seem to be over 17. Of course, Draco was certain that this was not the actual age of any of the hunters. Most likely, they would maintain the appearance they had when they accepted Artemis' blessing. They were dressed in silver parka and jeans, the same clothes Zoe and Talia wore. Was this the official uniform of the hunters? Zoe and Draco went to the main tent, the one belonging to the goddess Artemis. However, Draco did not find Artemis when he entered the interior. Instead, a little girl about 12 or 13 years old with reddish-brown hair gathered into a tail. Her eyes, a silvery yellow like the moon, were amazing. She had such a beautiful face that it was breathtaking, but her expression was serious. "You are Artemis?" The little girl nodded her head. "This is the way I'm most comfortable, whereas the way I showed you earlier is the way I use it when I have to attend to official business." She really was Artemis? Well, with this look, she seemed to be just another girl in the group, although it was evident that she was superior in every way. Draco understood why she was more comfortable with the girlish appearance. Artemis gestured to the seat in front of her, instructing Draco to take her seat. "To begin with, I have to thank you for taking the time to come here." Draco bowed his head, for he did not quite understand why Artemis was thanking him. It was he who wanted to receive the blessing of the goddess. Did Zoe not explain why I called you here?" Artemis had noticed this. "No, she didn't tell me any of that." Artemis gave Zoe a questioning look. "I haven't had time to do this. I was explaining everything about Western civilization." Artemis frowned, but soon relaxed and let the matter drop. She knew Zoe better than anyone else, as she had been with her the longest. The situation for the Olympian gods at this time is complicated. Apparently, a certain titan wants to revive and take revenge on the ruling gods. Creatures are appearing that I haven't hunted in millennia, prey so ancient that I had almost forgotten about them. This time we are here because we have detected the presence of a Manticore, but that's not the monster I'm looking for. Artemis briefly explained the problems that were occurring with Greek mythology. Artemis' words would scare more than one, but they only moved Draco. Everything about hunting enemies and upgrading was something that excited him terribly. "Well, where's that Manticore?" Draco was already rubbing his hands together, and he was practically drawing his bow to begin the hunt. "The Manticore is at a boarding school not far from here. We'll go hunt it when you're ready." Draco was surprised. What was a Manticore doing in a school? A Manticore is a monster similar to a sphinx, with the face of a human, the body of a lion, and the tail of a scorpion. How is it possible for a Manticore to hide in the human world? Maybe that monster had a way of taking on a human form to fool the human eye. According to our information, that Manticore is behind 2 demigods. They want to recruit them for the Titan Army. Titan Army? This was something that Draco had no idea about, though he could relate to the enemies of the Olympic gods. Artemis had said that they would move at the moment Draco was ready. Well, he was from the beginning. "I'm always ready to hunt. Shall we?" A small smile formed on Artemis' lips. She stood up and looked at Zoe. "Pack up the camp." Draco left Artemis' tent and walked between the tents. Zoe and Artemis had already given the order to clear the camp, so the girls had started to unpack it. Draco used this moment to get an idea of the number of girls who were accompanying Artemis. The hunters were no more than 20, and all of them were quite pretty. Their ages were around 15, more or less. Both Zoe and Talia seemed to be the oldest in the group. But Draco knew that Talia was the youngest of them all, so the age of all the girls should be above 20 at least. Draco examined the camp. 7 large tents, all of silver silk, arranged in a crescent around the campfire. White wolves circled the camp as if they were guard dogs, and hawks watched the surroundings from the trees. "Do you like what you see?" Draco didn't have to turn around to find out who this person was. "I quite like it. I'm not going to lie to you." If Draco meant the girls or the camp, Talia wasn't sure. "You must be careful. Even if you are part of the group now, and even if you are to receive Artemis' blessing, you must not look at any of the girls with lustful eyes. Artemis has been known to retaliate against men who do that." Talia sincerely warned Draco. He was a boy who had relationships with more than one woman, so he should be careful about his actions. "I still have to fix my situation with the girls I have at home. How dare I set my sights on other girls?" "TCH, you don't fool me with those words of yours. I'm sure you've been having a good time with Zoe by your side for so many hours." "A good time? I guess those who enjoy being in Antarctica can consider that a good time." Talia looked at Draco with wide eyes, but soon began to laugh. Haha, yes, you're right. Draco smiled as well. At least it seemed that Zoe was cold even to some girls. That was a small relief. The smile soon disappeared when Draco felt a murderous intent on his back. He turned immediately, only to find Zoe's cold eyes in the distance. She seems to have heard you. Stop laughing, will you? They didn't have time to continue the conversation when Artemis appeared in the middle of the group. The hunters had already finished packing, so it was time to get out of that place. The town the group went to was called Bar Harbor. Draco thought he was going to have to go up to Golden Drive again, but it seemed that Artemis group was not running at such a high speed as Zoe had run before. Draco suspected that Zoe had done it on purpose to screw him up, and he even gave her a strange look. She simply dodged Draco's gaze when she realized that he was looking at her. Draco was surprised by the girl's resistance. Do not judge them by their youthful appearance. They all had excellent stamina and speed. They were all running at 60 kilometers per hour for more than an hour, and none of them had any signs of fatigue. Draco thought that Artemis' blessing was influencing this. The boarding school they were headed for was called Westover Hall, and it was set on a cliff. It looked like a bloody, enchanted castle. How did Draco know that? Because they had already arrived there. More specifically, they were in a forest hundreds of feet from the castle. Zoe stepped forward as she complained. Shit, looks like those half-breeds beat us to it. Yes, it seemed that someone else had arrived at the castle before Artemis group. For boys, about 12 to 14 years old, were fighting a monster, the Manticore, outside the castle. They were obviously losing, and there wasn't much left for the Manticore to kill them all. Artemis approached Draco at this point. Remember, Draco, you have not yet received my blessing, so you cannot participate in this hunt. This surprised Draco. What was he doing here then? But, just watch for the moment. I'll let you participate in the next hunts. Draco clenched his teeth. He really wanted to kill that monster, but the goddess seemed adamant about this. In the end, a Manticore was just another monster in the crowd. There was no need to confront Artemis over a third-rate monster. It's all right. Artemis nodded and looked up at the monster with a calm and aggressive face at the same time. Phoebe, blow the hunting horn. Let's go hunting. One of the girls, who had been named Phoebe by Artemis herself, took out a hunting horn from God knows where and prepared to blow it. This girl was, without a doubt, the biggest and most robust of them all and had ginger hair. Just as Draco had seen the huntresses, they too had become aware of his presence. He was not surprised when, leaving aside Talia and a few other girls, the vast majority of the girls were suspicious of him. This was very evident, and Draco understood perfectly why this was so. Most hunters have hunted alongside Artemis for tens and hundreds of years. During that time, they had virtually no contact with men. This had led to their distrust of men. This big girl, Phoebe, was one of the girls who hadn't bothered to hide a little hostility towards Draco. He decided it was a good idea to be careful with that girl, as she only looked slightly weaker than Zoe. At that point, there was a change in the battle of the cliff. The Manticore, who seemed to be firing something poisonous from her tail, had lost her balance while fighting the boy holding a silver sword. As he fell, the monster fired a poisonous dart again. If it struck the boy, there was no doubt he would die. The boy had good reflexes, though. He touched his bracelet, and a shield appeared to protect him from the attack. That shield was extremely similar to Talia's, but it was surely of inferior quality. Talia's shield was still a replica of the Aegis, a gift from her father Zeus, so very few shields in this world could match or surpass it. The shield was instantly destroyed when it was attacked, but it managed to stop the dart. That the shield could only stop one attack had surprised Draco. Even if it was not at the level of Talia's shield, it was still a shield of celestial bronze. It seemed that Draco had underestimated this monster. But that wasn't the only thing that surprised Draco. Just as the boy was about to pierce the monster with his blade, and making the journey of the hunters futile, there was a rumble, and something began to glow from the cliff. It was a glossy black military device, with lateral devices that looked like laser-guided rockets. No doubt, it had to be deadly to operate. What was a war helicopter doing here? The arrival of the helicopter disconcerted the boys fighting the Manticore, and the Manticore took the opportunity to attack them again. You didn't have to be very smart to know that the helicopter was supporting the Manticore. Why were the humans allied with the monsters? Draco didn't have an answer for that, and he didn't have the time to think about it either. Just as the Manticore was about to attack again, Phoebe blew the horn. A sharp, penetrating sound came from the hunting horn. Instantly, the Manticore was paralyzed. For a moment, no one raised an eyebrow. All you could hear was the rumor of the blizzard and the rumor of the helicopter. No, you can't. In this sepulchral silence, the words of the Manticore reached everyone's ears. The first to attack was Artemis. She drew her silver bow and stretched the rope to the limit. A silver light appeared, taking the form of an arrow. Draco could feel the divine aura emanating from the arrow. In the serious face of the goddess was the confidence that she would not miss the shot, that it would hit the target without a doubt. The arrow flew out at divine speed. Almost instantaneously, the arrow was stuck in the Manticore's shoulder. The Manticore was not dead because it had managed to react at the last moment. With a silver arrow in its shoulder, the Manticore screamed in pain. "Damn you!" He wagged his tail and unleashed a shower of thorns into the forest from which the arrow had departed. But the hunters were not going to stand still. They took their bows and shot their arrows. Because of the high speed at which the hunters were shooting, it seemed that the silver arrows were infinite. Although these arrows did not have the divine aura of Artemis arrows, they were powerful enough to split the thorns in two. The accuracy of the hunters was also excellent, as they did not miss any shots. Each and every arrow they shot had a specific target, and they never missed. The Manticore tore the arrow from its shoulder with a howl, and it seemed that the monster had taken quite a bit of damage and was now weakened. The boy who had been fighting the monster saw that there was a chance for victory, so he got up and tried to give him a blow. However, the monster wasn't as hurt as he seemed. He dodged the sword and slammed it into the shield, which rolled it into the snow. "Come on!" Artemis screamed and ran to the battlefield. Everyone, including Draco, followed Artemis from behind. Those who were fighting were surprised to see them arrive. "The hunters!" shouted a blonde girl. Zoe went ahead of the group with a tight bow. "Permission to kill, my lady?" Asking permission to end the monster, she wouldn't take her eyes off the Manticore. The monster let out a moan. "It's not fair. It's direct interference. It's against the old laws." Artemis stepped forward. "It's not true. The hunt for all wild beasts is within my purview. And you, disgusting creature, are a wild beast." After making it clear to the Manticore, she looked at Zoe. "Zoe, permission granted." However, the Manticore did not intend to die so easily. "If I can't take them alive, I'll take them dead." The Manticore screamed as he lunged at the boy with the sword and another very young boy. "No!" The blonde girl screamed in desperation, and she charged toward the monster. Draco did not understand the girl's actions. She was obviously weaker than the boy with the blade, and he was not even capable of defeating the Manticore. What made her think she could save him from this situation? Probably love? Draco thought about what he would do if one of his girls was in danger. No doubt, he would use all his power to rescue them. Isn't that what he trained so hard for? No doubt. He had always wanted the power to survive in this world inhabited by supernatural beings. But since he rescued Kuroka, Chiron, Aquino, etc., he had another goal: to protect those girls. But these children were very weak. What were they doing fighting a monster so much more powerful than them? Idiots. Draco couldn't help but say what he really thought of them. "Back off, half-breed. Get out of the line of fire." The blonde girl got in the way of Zoe's vision, preventing her from shooting. Not only was she weak, but she was upsetting those who really had the power to kill the monster. She did not heed Zoe's words. She jumped on the back of the beast and plunged the knife into its lion's mane. The Manticore howled and stirred in circles, wagging her tail, while the blonde girl held on as if life was in them, as it probably was. Zoe seemed not to want to shoot for fear of hurting the girl, but she also knew that they had to kill the monster. "Fire! No!" Now it was the boy with the sword's turn to scream. But, just as the blonde girl had done before, the hunters ignored the scream and launched their arrows. The first one pierced the monster's neck, another one hit him in the chest. The Manticore took a step back and staggered, howling. "This is not the end, Slayers. You will pay dearly." Before anyone could react, the monster, with the girl on his back, jumped off the cliff and sank into darkness. Annabeth. Apparently, the blonde girl's name was Annabeth. That's a nice name, but it's a shame the girl's probably dead. The boy with the sword, who had shouted the girl's name, ran after the Manticore. However, the machine guns and the helicopter stopped him. Most of the jackets dispersed quickly as small holes created by the bullets appeared in the snow. Draco remained calm. If the bullets could penetrate his skin, he might as well kill himself directly. "Humans aren't part of your hunt, are they, Artemis?" A cruel smile appeared on the dragon's face as he pulled Gondiver out. Artemis frowned when she saw this, but relaxed and smiled slightly when she saw the twinkle in Draco's eyes. Those were the eyes of a hunter looking at his prey. "Go ahead, do whatever you want." Draco, having received permission, did not hesitate to create a magic arrow. A deranged noble phantasm, fired by another A-range noble phantasm. The human who was flying that helicopter could take pride in dying at the hands of such a lethal and unique weapon. Draco hesitated to use his new skill, the flames of the giant Sutra, but that was too much for a mere human. So he simply shot his arrow into the helicopter. Almost instantly, the helicopter exploded into dust. 0 experience points have been obtained. Because of the effects of title skill, Walking Egg, another 0 experience points were obtained. Draco was surprised. So, if an enemy was too weak, Draco wasn't going to get any experience. Looks like the plan to massacre a third world country was going to have to be called off. Meanwhile, Zoe was examining the others. Artemis walked beside her. 3 half-breeds and a satyr, my lady. Yes, I can see that. A few campers from Chiron. The boy with the blade, which Draco noticed was not normal at all, shouted at the group of hunters. "Annabeth, we have to go save her." Artemis turned to him. "I'm sorry, Percy Jackson. There's nothing we can do for her." He tried to get up, but a couple of hunters kept him on the floor. "And you're in no condition to throw yourself off the cliff." However, this was not enough to stop him. "Let me go." "Who do you think you are?" "Oh." He seemed to have enough courage to answer Artemis herself. Zoe's face was lovely. She was so angry she wanted to slap him right there. However, Artemis stopped her and looked at this Percy with cold eyes. "No. No disrespect, Zoe. He's just agitated. He doesn't understand. I am Artemis, goddess of the hunt." It seemed that the 14-year-old had short-circuited when he heard the goddess' response. In the end, he could only mutter an "ah well," which was nothing compared to the satyr. He drowned out a scream, knelt in the snow, and began to whimper. "Thank you, Lady Artemis. You are so. Wow." Talia didn't seem to be able to handle this behavior, so she yelled at the satyr. "Get up, go, boy." At which point, the other girl interrupted. "Stop, time out." She was young, about Chiron and Valina's age. She started pointing out each and every one of them. "What's going on here? Who are you? Who are you all?" The young girl, whose name Draco did not know, asked uncertainly. She was confused but did not seem to be afraid. Her black eyes shone with a hint of something strange, perhaps madness or genius. She was about the same height as Chiron and Valina, a height appropriate for her age. Her skin was olive, and she wore a green hat that practically hid her face. Artemis' expression softened when she saw the girl. "Perhaps it would be better, my dear girl, to know first who you are. Who are your parents?" The girl looked nervously at the little boy, who should be her brother, who was staring dazedly at Artemis. "Our parents are dead. We are orphans. There's a bank trust that pays for our school, but—" She faltered. It was easy to guess from their faces that no one believed her. Even Draco could feel that, although it was weak, a special power that resided inside the siblings. He could feel some divinity inside of those little bodies. "What?" she demanded. "I'm telling the truth. You are a half-blood. One of thy parents was mortal." Draco realized now that Zoe's accent was weird. She sounded old-fashioned, like she was reading from an ancient book. The other was an Olympian. An Olympian athlete? No, one of the gods. So these kids here were demigods. It was true that the aura they emitted was similar to Talia's, but they were much weaker. Not only that, but that the divinity they emitted was also different. Perhaps that was related to the true identity of their parents. By the way, the boy named Percy Jackson and the girl named Annabeth should also be demigods. Cool, said the little kid. No, this is not cool. The girl's voice quavered. However, the boy didn't care what his sister said. He had already started to jump around the group. Is it true that Zeus has lightning with a destructive power of 600? And that he earns extra points for? Nico, shut up. The girl put her hands on her face when she saw her little brother act like that. This isn't your stupid game of mythomagia, you know? There's no such thing as gods. Draco couldn't quite understand the situation. What was this mythomania game you were talking about? However, he could get an idea in his head of what was really going on. Apparently, these two children were the children of an Olympian god. The gods had the reputation of having children with mortals and then abandoning them, never to see them again. This was probably the same case. The mother, or father, of these children had died, and so the child said she had no parents. She was not far wrong, as her father, or mother, was not going to go near them. Artemis then looked at Percy Jackson. Do not despair. She was a very brave girl. If it is possible to find her, I will find her. Then why don't you let us go get her? The boy asked. Draco stepped forward at that moment. She's disappeared, literally. I stopped feeling her presence when they both fell off the cliff. But neither of them is dead. Artemis nodded, showing that she agreed with Draco. That's right. Haven't you noticed, son of Poseidon? There is a magical phenomenon at play. I don't know exactly how or why, but your friend has vanished. Artemis' words caught Draco's attention, and he began to pay more attention to Percy. A son of the three great gods wasn't something you saw every day. Talia was Zeus' daughter, and Percy was Poseidon's son. Now he needed to meet a son of Hades to complete the trilogy. Nico intervened by raising his hand. And Dr. Thorne? It was impressive how you riddled him. Is he really alive? He was a Manticore. I hope it was destroyed for the time being, but monsters never die at all. They form again and again, and you have to hunt them whenever they reappear. The goddess Artemis explained. Or they hunt us, Talio observed. The girl, Draco would later discover her name was Bianca D'Angelo, shuddered. Which explains, do you remember Nico, the guys who tried to attack us last summer in an alley in Washington? And that bus driver, Nico remembered. The one with the ram's horns. I told you that it was real. That's why Grover has been watching you, Percy intervened. To keep you safe if you turn to be half-bloods. Grover? Bianca stared at the other boy. You're a demigod? Well, a satyr, actually. He kicked off his shoes and displayed his goat hooves. Looking at the face Bianca was making, it looked like Bianca was about to faint. You, put your shoes back on, Talia said. You re-freaking her out? Hey, my hooves are clean. Bianca, Percy said, we came here to help you. You and Nico need the training to survive. Dr. Thorne won't be the last monster you meet. You need to come to camp. Camp? She asked. Camp Half-Blood. It's where Half-Blood learn to survive and stuff. You can join us, stay there year-round if you like. Camp Half-Blood is the place where the demigods are protected from the dangers of the world. Not all demigods are powerful fighters, and those who are not brought to this camp are often killed by monsters at an early age. There they are trained, and they are prepared to face most of the dangers they may face. It must be said that the vast majority of demigods are not so powerful. Only the most exceptional ones can make a name for themselves in the supernatural world, while the rest can hardly compare to low-class devils and mid-class devils. Exceptions to this are those who are lucky enough to receive a sacred gear, those who have a supernatural talent from birth, and the children of the three great gods. Especially the children of the three great gods. Children of Zeus like Perseus or Heracles are the most known ones throughout history, but other influential characters throughout history are also children of Zeus. One of his most recent children, not counting Talia, and influential in contemporary history, is Amelia Earhart. Sons of Poseidon like Theseus and Bellerophon are also very famous, and he has also had some influential sons throughout history. All of them related to the seas. The sons of Hades are not so famous in mythologies or in contemporary history. But it is said that Hitler was the son of this god. During World War II, the Allies, which representing the British Commonwealth, the Soviet Union of Socialist Republics, and the United States of America, were known as the Big Three. Let's go back to the conversation that was taking place on the cliff. Sweet, let's go. Nico seemed very excited about this whole thing. Everything about the gods seemed to appeal to him. Wait, Bianca shook her head. I don't. There's another option, Zoe said. No, there isn't, Percy replied. Draco understood that the other option Zoe was talking about applied only to Bianca. It was the option of joining Artemis. We've burdened these children enough, Artemis announced. Zoe, we will rest here for a few hours. Raise the tents. Treat the wounded. Retrieve our guests' belongings from the school. Yes, my lady. And Bianca, come with me. I would like to speak with you. What about me? Nico asked. Artemis considered what to say to the boy. Perhaps you can show Grover how to play that card game you enjoy. I'm sure Grover would be happy to entertain you for a while, as a favor to me. Grover just about tripped over himself getting up. You bet. Come on, Nico. Nico and Grover walked off toward the woods, talking about hit points and armor ratings, and a bunch of other geeky stuff. Artemis led a confused-looking Bianca along the cliff. The hunters began unpacking their knapsacks and making camp. Draco just followed Talia around, since he didn't know what to do at the moment. She walked over to where Percy was. Hey, Percy. The boy seemed to be thinking about something. He was practically crying, so he was surprised when Talia approached him. You, Talia? Yes, it's me. Talia smiled slightly. Draco was surprised. It seemed these two knew each other. Know each other, he could not help but ask. Talia nodded. Yes, it was Percy who saved me and brought me back to life a few months ago. Huh? Draco was lost again. You see, for various reasons I had to run away from home 7 years ago. There I met two other people, two demigods. They were a boy named Luke and Annabeth. Draco's eyes opened wide. Annabeth? Yes, the same girl who just disappeared. Talia had been silent all this time, but she must have been hurt by the disappearance of her friend, too. Draco could even see a trail of tears now that she was looking better. Grover was the satyr who took us to the camp, but there were several accidents on the way. In the end, for everyone to survive, I had to sacrifice myself. For her friends to live, Talia gave her life 7 years ago. At that time, I was 12, and now, biologically speaking, I'm almost 16. You understand that this is not very logical, right? I should be 19 right now. Yeah, that was definitely weird. Although there was also the possibility that she might have been turned into a hunter when she was about to turn 16. No, that possibility didn't exist. Talia had said before that she'd only been a hunter for a few months. My father, Zeus, turned me into a tree to keep me from dying. So I was for 7 years transformed into a tree. However, that tree was poisoned, but Percy got the golden fleece and managed to get it back. But no one expected the effects of this to be too powerful, and I retook human form. There seemed to be a deeper story that Talia had hidden from Draco, but this information was enough for the moment. Now Draco felt he knew the girl better. Percy, don't worry. If Artemis said she's going to look for Annabeth, it means she's going to find her. No prey has ever escaped her before. Still, the boy seemed to hesitate. Just then, Grover and Nico returned from their walk. Grover, the satyr, helped Percy heal his arm. Draco realized that the cream they were using was similar to the one Azazel had given him long ago. So this was the ambrosia, part of what made up Azazel's wonderful cream. Nico rummaged through his own bag, which the hunters had apparently packed for him. Though how they'd snuck into Westover Hall unseen, Draco didn't know. Nico laid out a bunch of figurines in the snow, little battle replicas of Greek gods and heroes. Draco recognized Zeus with a lightning bolt, Ares with a spear, Apollo with his sun chariot. Big collection, he said. Nico grinned. I've got almost all of them, plus their holographic cards. Well, except for a few really rare ones. You've been playing this game for a long time? Just this year. Before that. He knit his eyebrows. What? Draco asked. I forget. That's weird. He looked unsettled, but it didn't last long. Hey, can I see that sword you were using? Percy showed him the sword. Draco could see the word Riptide on it, and explained how it turned from a pen into a sword just by uncapping it. Elmeo, that surely was useful for a student. Cool. Does it ever run out of ink? Well, I don't actually write with it. Are you really the son of Poseidon? Well, yeah. Can you surf really well, then? The fuck was going on with this conversation? Percy looked over to Draco and Grover, who were trying hard not to laugh. Geez, Nico. I never really tried. In the short time Draco had spent with these boys, he had to say he liked them. What about you? What are you? Nico asked Draco. A half-smile appeared on Draco's face. I'm a dragon. Draco partially reversed his transformation, allowing his scales and horns to appear. Whoa, so cool. Did Nico think everything was cool? They were going to talk a little bit more, but Zoe Nightshade came up to them. Percy Jackson, Draco. Zoe guided them to Artemis' tent. Bianca D'Angelo was already sitting next to Artemis. The inside of the tent was warm and comfortable. Silk rugs and pillows covered the floor. Draco took this time to look at what was inside the tent. In the center, a golden brazier of fire seemed to burn without fuel or smoke. Behind the goddess, on a polished oak display stand, was her huge silver bow, carved to resemble gazelle horns. The walls were hung with animal pelts, black bear, tiger, and several other Draco didn't recognize. He figured an animal rights activist would have had a heart attack looking at all those rare skins. Still, maybe since Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, she could replenish whatever she shot. Draco thought she had another animal pelt lying next to her. Then he realized it was a live animal, a deer with glittering fur and silver horns, its head resting contentedly in Artemis's lap. Join us, boys, the goddess said. They sat across from her on the tent floor. The goddess studied Percy, which it seems too uncomfortable for the boy. Are you surprised by my age? She asked. A little. I could appear as a grown woman, or a blazing fire, or anything else I want, but this is what I prefer. This is the average age of my hunters, and all young maidens for whom I am patron before they go astray. Just like Draco thought before, this was the reason behind the goddess' young age. Go astray? Draco asked. Grow up. Become smitten with boys. Become silly, preoccupied, insecure. Forget themselves. Huh? Zoe sat down at Artemis' right. She glared at both as if all the stuff Artemis had just said was their fault, like they'd invented the idea of being a guy. You must forgive my hunters if they don't welcome you, Artemis said. It's very rare that we would have boys in this camp. Boys are usually forbidden to have any contact with the hunters. The last one to see this camp. Which one was it? She looked at Zoe, waiting for an answer. That boy in Colorado, you turned him into a jackalope, she said. Ah, yes. Artemis nodded, satisfied. I enjoy making jackalopes. At any rate, Percy, I've asked you here so that you might tell me more of the Manticore. Bianca has reported some of the disturbing things the monster said, but she may not have understood them. I'd like to hear them from you. Percy told her a resume of what the monster has told him. Some stuff that Draco was uninterested. When he was done, Artemis put her hand thoughtfully on her silver bow. I feared this was the answer. Zoe sat forward. The scent, my lady? Yes. What scent? Draco asked. I've told you before. This is as I feared. Things are stirring that I have not hunted in millennia. Praise so old I have nearly forgotten. She stared at Percy intently. We came here tonight sensing the Manticore, but he was not the one I seek. Tell me again exactly what Dr. Thorne said. I hate middle school dances. No. After that, he said somebody called the general was going to explain things to me. Zoe face paled. She turned to Artemis and started to say something, but Artemis raised her hand. Go on, Percy, the goddess said. Well, then Thorne was talking about the great stir pot. Stirring, Bianca corrected. Yeah, and he said, soon we shall have the most important monster of all, the one that shall bring about the downfall of Olympus. The goddess was so still that she could have been a statue. Maybe he was lying? Draco said. Artemis shook her head. No, he was not. I've been too slow to see the signs. I must hunt this monster. Zoe looked like she was trying very hard not to be afraid, but she nodded. What was so scary to make Zoe act like this? We will leave right away, my lady. No, Zoe. I must do this alone. But Artemis, this task is too dangerous even for the hunters, even for Draco. You know where I must start my search. You cannot go there with me. As you wish, my lady. I will find this creature, Artemis vowed, and I shall bring it back to Olympus by the winter solstice. It will be all the proof I need to convince the council of the gods of how much danger we are in. You know what the monster is? Draco asked. Artemis gripped her bow. Let us pray I am wrong. Can goddesses pray? Percy asked. Draco hadn't thought about that, too. A flicker of a smile played across Artemis' lips. Before I go, Percy Jackson, I have a small task for you. Does it involve getting turned into a jackalope? Percy, this guy has good nerves. Draco's thoughts of being his friend were increasing. Sadly, no. I want you to escort the hunters back to Camp Half-Blood. They can stay there in safety until I return. What? Zoe blurted out. But, Artemis, we hate that place. The last time we stayed there. Yes, I know, Artemis said. But I'm sure Dionysus Sill does not hold a grudge just because of a little, misunderstanding. It's your right to use Cabin 8 whenever you are in need. Besides, I hear they rebuilt the cabins you burned down. Zoe muttered something about foolish campers. But what about Draco? He can't go to the same cabin as us. Zoe shouted while she threw a hateful look at the dragon. About that? Artemis stopped to think for a moment. I'll talk to my father, so he can go to cabin 1 with Talia. This? Enough, Zoe. The goddess interrupted before Zoe could say anything more. Now there is one last decision to make. Have you made up your mind, my girl? Artemis looked at Bianca. Bianca hesitated. I'm still thinking about it. Wait, Percy said. Thinking about what? They've invited me to join the hunt. What? But you can't. You have to come to Camp Half-Blood so Chiron can train you. It's the only way you can learn to survive. It's not the only way for a girl, Zoe said. But Percy wasn't going to let Bianca go so easily. Bianca, the camp is cool. It's got a Pegasus stable and a sword-fighting arena, and, what do you get by joining the hunters? To begin with, Zoe said, immortality. He stared at her, then at Artemis. She's kidding, right? Zoe rarely kids about anything, Artemis said. My hunters follow me on my adventures. They're my maidservants, my companions, my sisters in arms. Once they swear loyalty to me, they are indeed immortal, unless they fall in battle, which is unlikely, or break their oath. What oath? Percy asked. To forswear romantic love forever, Artemis said. To never grow up, never get married. To be a maiden eternally. Like you. The goddess nodded. So, you just go around the country recruiting half-bloods. Not just half-bloods, Zoe interrupted. Lady Artemis doesn't discriminate by birth. All who honor the goddess may join. Half-bloods, nymphs, mortals. Which are you then? Anger flashed in Zoe's eyes. That is not thy concern, boy. The point is Bianca may join if she wished. It's her choice. Bianca, this is crazy. What about your brother? Nico can't be a hunter. Draco started to get bored at that point. This talk was utterly useless. Percy, stop it there. Let the girl make a decision by herself. Okay? It's not such a big deal if she wants to join the hunt or not. Nor it matters if her brother can join or not. But, as Percy tried to start discussing again, Draco let a bit of his aura on the boy. He went quiet instantly. Artemis thanked him with a small smile, and even Zoe's eyes were a little bit less aggressive toward Draco. Artemis then looked at Bianca. If you are worried about your brother, he is going to be safe in the camp. You can see him from time to time, Artemis assured Bianca. But you will be free of responsibility. He will have the camp counselors to take care of him. And you will have a new family, us. Bianca looked at Zoe. Is it worth it? She nodded. It is. What do I have to do? Zoe looked at Artemis, and she looked at both Bianca and Draco. Okay, you both have to repeat what Zoe is going to say. Draco smiled excitedly. He knew the time to receive Artemis' blessing has finally arrived. I pledge myself to the goddess Artemis. I turn my back on the company of men, accept eternal maidenhood, and join the hunt. Both of them repeated the lines. That's it? Zoe nodded. If Lady Artemis accepts the pledge, then it is binding. I accept it, Artemis said. The flames in the braziers brightened, casting a silver glow over the room. They both didn't look different, but they took a deep breath when they noted the difference. Draco just had to look at the notifications coming from the system. Title skill, Artemis Blessing acquired. Level of normal skill, accuracy, was increased from 6 to max. Strength boost. Agility massive boost. STR *1, 5 equals 775 *1, 5 equals 1162. AGI * is equal to 675 times 2 equals 1350. Special skill Zoolingualism obtained. Artemis Blessing was different from what Draco thought. However, he was pleased to have it. What he had achieved at this point was the equivalent of going up over 70 levels. No, that could only be considered for STR. Draco had climbed well over 70 levels to get where he is today and had had to go through many battles. The gods had well deserved their place as the most powerful in the world alongside the dragons. Only a blessing from an Olympic goddess was enough to give a person a great deal of power. Bianca also received the blessing. She looked no different, but she took a deep breath and opened her eyes wide. I feel stronger. Yeah, I'm a lot stronger now. Draco agreed with her. Welcome, sister, Zoe said with a wide smile, which vanished when she turned to Draco. Welcome, brother. Wait. You're one of the hunters? Percy was alarmed. Everyone who had seen one boy turning into one of Artemis' hunters would be alarmed. It was known that some boys went with them to hunt, but they never joined officially. But now, he just saw a boy joining the hunt. Remember your pledge, Artemis said. It's now your life. She then turned to Percy. It seems that his job was to recruit both siblings, and now he has failed. Do not despair, Percy Jackson, Artemis said. You will get to show the D'Angelos your camp, and if Nico so chooses, he can stay there. Great, he said, trying not to sound surly. How are we supposed to get there? Artemis closed her eyes. Dawn is approaching. Zoe, break camp. You must get to Long Island quickly and safely. I shall summon a ride for my brother. Zoe didn't look real happy about this idea, but she nodded and told Bianca to follow her. As she was leaving, Bianca paused in front of Percy. I'm sorry, Percy, but I want this. I really do. Then, he just left feeling depressed, leaving Draco alone with the goddess. So, what do I have to do now? He asked. Draco comes with Zoe, because he was going to help with the hunt. But now, Artemis was going alone. You can go back to Japan if you want, but you want me to help the hunters? The goddess nodded. You know that they don't like me, except for Bianca, Talia, and very few of them. Isn't it better if I go back to my place, and then return if you need help? Artemis looked down for a moment, and then she looked at Draco with complicated eyes. For a moment, she looked vulnerable. Those in the Olympus doesn't realize the dangerous that our situation is, so I can't fail hunting this monster. But if I fail, I will need your help instantly. I only need you here for a few weeks or months, the time I'm going to hunt this monster. Can you support the hunters during this time? Draco stayed silent for a moment, but he finally took a decision. So, he said, we're going to get a ride from your brother. Huh. Artemis' silver eyes gleamed. Yes, dragon. You see, Bianca D'Angelo is not the only one with an annoying brother. It's time for you to meet my irresponsible twin, Apollo. One more time. The hunters broke camp as quickly as they'd set it up. Artemis stared into the east like she was expecting something. Bianca sat off to one side, talking with Nico. Draco could tell from his gloomy face that she was explaining her decision to join the hunt. Draco had to agree with Percy in one thing. Her decision was selfish. She was abandoning her little brother, who doesn't have anyone to rely on. But Draco also understood that she is a little girl and she doesn't realize the real consequences of her actions. Finally, the sky began to lighten. Artemis muttered about time. He's so lazy during the winter. Draco, who was at her side, asked, You're, waiting for sunrise? For my brother. Yes. Draco didn't want to be rude. He knew the legends about Apollo, or sometimes Helios, driving a big sun chariot across the sky. But he also knew that the sun was really a star about a zillion miles away. He knew that some myths were real, but still, with so many sun gods, he didn't see how Apollo could drive the sun. It's not exactly as you think, Artemis said like she was reading his mind. Oh, okay. So, it's not like he'll be pulling up in a... There was a sudden burst of light on the horizon, a blast of warmth. Don't look, Artemis advised. Not until he parks. Parks? Draco saw that Artemis was averting her eyes, but he didn't need to. The skill, branch destruction, is the best armor against temperature, and there wasn't any fire stronger than the flame of Surtur. To Draco's surprise, what he saw was a red Maserati spider. It was so awesome it glowed. Then he realized it was glowing because the metal was hot. The snow had melted around the Maserati in a perfect circle, which explained why Draco was now standing on green grass and his shoes were wet. The driver got out, smiling. He looked about 17 or 18. This guy had sandy hair and outdoorsy good looks. This guy was as tall as Draco, and his smile was bright and playful. The Maserati driver wore jeans and loafers and a sleeveless t-shirt. He was Apollo, the next chief god of Greek mythology. Wow, Talia muttered. Apollo is hot. He's the sun god, Draco said. That's not what I meant. Talia turned a bit to look at Draco. But you don't lose to him. Draco shrugged. He was not competing with anyone. Little sister, Apollo called. If his teeth were any whiter, he could have blinded all of them without the sun car. What's up? You never call. You never write. I was getting worried. Artemis sighed. I'm fine, Apollo. And I'm not your little sister. Hey, I was born first. We're twins. How many millennia do we have to argue? So, what's up? He interrupted. Got the girls with you, I see. You all need some archery tips? He looked at Draco, and his eyes opened wide for a moment. Whoa, so you're that kid. Hey, you have potential, you know? Do you want some tips, too? Draco raised his eyebrow, surprised at Apollo's attitude. The god came to Draco's ear and whispered, Watch what you're doing to my sister. It wouldn't be the first time I killed one of her suitors. Draco raised the other eyebrow. Now he was even more surprised. Mind you, he was not afraid. Draco doubted that the god could actually kill him. I'd like to see you try. Artemis grit her teeth. I need a favor. I have some hunting to do alone. I need you to take my companions to Camp Half-Blood. Sure, sis. Transportation for the hunters, you say? Good timing. I was just about ready to roll. These demigods will also need a ride, Artemis said, pointing to Percy's group. Some of Chiron's campers. No problem. Apollo checked on them. Then, he turned to Talia. Let's see. Talia, right? I've heard all about you. Talia blushed. Hi, Lord Apollo. Zeus girl, yes? Makes you my half-sister. Used to be a tree, didn't you? Glad you are back. I hate it when pretty girls turn into trees. Man, I remember one time. Brother, Artemis said. You should get going? All right. Then he looked at Percy Jackson, and his eyes narrowed. Percy Jackson? Yeah, yes, sir. Apollo studied him, but he didn't say anything. Well, he said last. We'd better load up? Huh? Ride only goes one way west. And if you miss it, you miss it. Draco looked at the Maserati, which would seat 2 people max. There were about 20 of us. Cool car, Nico said. Thanks, kid, Apollo said. But how will we all fit? Oh. Apollo seemed to notice the problem for the first time. Well, yeah, I hate to change out of sports car mode, but I suppose... He took out his car keys and beeped the security alarm button. Chirp, chirp. For a moment, the car glowed brightly again. When the glare died, the Maserati had been replaced by a big bus. Right? He said. Everybody in? Zoe ordered the hunters to start loading. She picked up her camping pack, and Apollo said, Here, sweetheart. Let me get that. Zoe recoiled. Her eyes flashed murderously. Brother, Artemis chided. You do not help my hunters. You do not look at, talk to, or flirt with my hunters. And you do not call them sweetheart. Apollo spread his hands. Sorry, I forgot. Hey sis, where are you off to anyway? Hunting, Artemis said. It's none of your business. I'll find out. I see y'all. Know all? Artemis snorted. Just drop them off, Apollo. And no messing around. No. I never mess around, Dot. Artemis rolled her eyes, then looked at the hunters. I will see you by the winter solstice. Zoe, you are in charge of the hunters. Do well. Do as I would do. Zoe straightened. Yes, my lady. Artemis knelt and touched the ground as if looking for tracks. When she rose, she looked troubled. So much danger. The beast must be found. She sprinted toward the woods and melted into the snow and shadows. Apollo turned and grinned, jangling the car keys on his finger. So, he said, who wants to drive? The hunters piled into the van. They all crammed into the back, so they'd be as far away as possible from Apollo and the rest of the highly infectious males. They didn't let Draco sat there. Bianca went with them, leaving her little brother to hang in the front with the boys, which seemed cold to Draco, but Nico didn't seem to mind. The only exception for the girls was Talia, who went with and sat with Draco. This is so cool, Nico said, jumping up and down in the driver's seat. Is this really the sun? I thought Helios and Selene were the sun and moon gods. How come sometimes it's them and sometimes it's you and Artemis? Downsizing, Apollo said. The Romans started it. They couldn't afford all those temple sacrifices, so they laid off Helios and Selene and folded their duties into our job descriptions. My sis got the moon, I got the sun. It was pretty annoying at first, but at least I got this cool car. But how does it work? Nico asked. I thought the sun was a big fiery ball of gas. Apollo chuckled and ruffled Nico's hair. That rumor probably got started because Artemis used to call me a big fiery ball of gas. Seriously, kid, it depends on whether you're talking astronomy or philosophy. You want to talk astronomy? Well, what fun is that? You want to talk about how humans think about the sun? Now that's more interesting. They got a lot riding on the sun, or so to speak. It keeps them warm, grows their crops, powers engines, makes everything look, well, sunnier. This chariot is built out of human dreams about the sun, kid. It's as old as Western civilization. Every day, it drives across the sky from east to west, lighting up all those puny little mortal lives. The chariot is a manifestation of the sun's power, the way mortals perceive it. Make sense? Nico shook his head. No. Well then, just think of it as a really powerful, really dangerous solar car. Draco plunged into his thoughts. This chariot was very powerful, probably one of the most powerful weapons of the god Apollo. If Draco were to compare it to Golden Drive at full power, he felt his noble phantasm was inferior. Can I drive? Nico asked. No, too young. Ooh, ooh. Grover raised his hand. No, Apollo said. Too furry. He looked past Draco and focused on Talia. Daughter of Zeus, he said. Lord of the sky. Perfect. Oh no. Talia shook her head. No, thanks. Come on, Apollo said. How old are you? Talia hesitated. I don't know. It was sad but true. She'd been turned into a tree when she was 12, but that had been 7 years ago. So she should be 19 if you went by years. But she still felt like she was 12, and if you looked at her, she seemed somewhere in between. The best Chiron could figure, she had kept aging while in tree form, but much more slowly. Apollo tapped his finger to his lips. You're 15, almost 16. How do you know that? Hey, I'm the god of prophecy. I know stuff. You'll turn 16 in about a week. But since you are now a hunter, it doesn't really matter. Which means you're old enough now to drive with a learner's permit. Talia shifted her feet nervously. I know what you're going to say, Apollo said. You don't deserve an honor like driving the sun chariot. That's not what I was going to say. Don't sweat it. Maine to Long Island is a brief trip, and don't worry about what happened to the last kid I trained. You're Zeus' daughter. He's not going to blast you out of the sky. Apollo laughed good-naturedly. The rest of them didn't join him. Talia tried to protest, but Apollo was absolutely not going to take no for an answer. He hit a button on the dashboard, and a sign popped up along the top of the windshield. Draco had to read it backwards. He was pretty sure it said, Warning, student driver. Take it away, Apollo told Talia. You're going to be a natural. Draco had to admit he was a little worried. Talia had no knowledge of how to drive a car, much less this solar-powered chariot. This wasn't the time to cause a not-so-natural disaster in the United States. Speed equals heat, Apollo advised. So start slowly and make sure you've got good altitude before you really open her up. Talia gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked like she was going to be sick. "What's wrong?" Draco asked her. "Nothing," she said shakily. "And nothing is wrong." It was obvious that something was wrong. She pulled back on the wheel. It tilted, and the bus lurched upwards so fast that Percy fell back and crashed against something soft. "Ow," Grover said. "Sorry." "Slower." Apollo said. "Sorry." Talia said. "I've got it under control." "No, you don't." Draco looked out of the window. He saw a smoking ring of trees from the clearing where we'd taken off. "Talia," he said, "lighten up on the accelerator." "I've got it, Draco," she said, gritting her teeth. But she kept it floored. "Loosen up," he told her. "I'm loose," Talia said. She was so stiff she looked like she was made out of plywood. "We need to veer south for Long Island," Apollo said. "Hang a left." Talia jerked the wheel and again threw Percy into Grover, who yelped. "The other left," Apollo suggested. She had mistaken right with left right now. Draco made the mistake of looking out of the window again. They were at airplane height now, so high the sky was starting to look black. "Ah," Apollo said, and Draco got the feeling that he was forcing himself to sound calm. "A little lower, sweetheart. Cape Cod is freezing over." Talia tilted the wheel. Her face was chalk white, her forehead beaded with sweat. Something was definitely wrong. The bus pitched down, and somebody screamed. Now, they were heading straight toward the Atlantic Ocean at 1,000 miles an hour, the New England coastline off to their right. And it was getting hot in the bus. Apollo had been thrown somewhere in the back of the bus, but he started climbing up the rows of seats. "Take the wheel," Grover begged him. Draco frowned. If Apollo did not do something, there was a chance someone would die today. "No worries," Apollo said. He looked plenty worried. "She just has to learn to WHOAs." Draco saw what he was seeing. Down below them was a little snow-covered New England town. At least, it used to be snow-covered. As he watched, the snow melted off the trees and the roofs and the lawns. The white steeple on a church turned brown and started to melt. Little plumes of smoke, like birthday candles, were popping up all over the town. Trees and rooftops were catching fire. "Pull up!" Draco yelled. There was a wild light in Talia's eyes. She yanked back on the wheel. As they zoomed up, Draco could see through the back window that the fires in the town were being snuffed out by the sudden blast of cold. "There!" Apollo pointed. "Long Island, dead ahead. Let's slow down, dear." "Dead is only an expression." Talia was thundering toward the coastline of northern Long Island. There was Camp Half-Blood, the valley, the woods, the beach. Draco could see the dining pavilion, it looked like that, and cabins and the amphitheater. "I'm under control," Talia muttered. "I'm under control." They were only a few hundred yards away now. "Brake," Apollo said. "I can do this." "Brake!" Talia slammed her foot on the brake, and the Sun bus pitched forward at a 45-degree angle, slamming into the Camp Half-Blood canoe lake with a huge FLOSH. Steam billowed up, sending several frightened naiads scrambling out of the water with half-woven wicker baskets. Naiads are daughters of the river gods. They are a type of nymphs. The bus bobbed to the surface, along with a couple of capsized, half-melted canoes. "Well," said Apollo with a brave smile. "You were right, my dear. You had everything under control. Let's go see if we boiled anyone important, shall we?" Camp Half-Blood is a Greek demigod training facility located on the north shore of Long Island. The camp is directed by the god Dionysus, who the campers call Mr. D, and Chiron, a centaur who is the activities director. It is also the Greek counterpart of Camp Jupiter, a Roman camp in San Francisco, California. The camp has magical borders which are enforced by the Golden Fleece, retrieved by the satyr Grover Underwood, the Cyclops Tyson, and demigods Percy Jackson, Clarice LaRue, and Annabeth Chase. Stolen from Polyphemus Island, it was placed on Talia's pine tree, ensuring that no monster could get into camp. The fleece stays on the tree, guarded by the dragon Peleus, its magical powers protecting the camp from monsters and invaders. The camp is described as being the only safe place for half-bloods, although in the Heroes of Olympus series it is revealed that there is a similar camp for Roman demigods, Camp Jupiter, located in San Francisco. The half-bloods live in cabins, one for each of the 12 Olympians. Later, Many more cabins were added for minor gods and goddesses after Percy's request in the last Olympian, and eat at the dining pavilion. There is also an archery field, a sword-fighting arena, a climbing wall with lava for training, an amphitheater, stables, an armory, and the big house. The camp's cover name is Delphi Strawberry Service, a reference to the name of the Oracle of Delphi. There is more important information about this camp, but it is up to you if you want to know about it. Draco had never been in Camp Half-Blood, so Percy had to explain a lot of things to him. See, the camp has the ultimate magic climate control. Nothing gets inside the borders unless the director, Mr. D, who is the god Dionysus, wants it to. Even Percy thought it would be warm and sunny, but instead, the snow had been allowed to fall lightly. Frost covered the chariot track and the strawberry fields. The cabins were decorated with tiny lights like Christmas lights, except they seemed to be balls of a real fire. More lights glowed in the woods, and weirdest of all, a flame flickered in the attic window of the big house, where the oracle dwelt, imprisoned in an old, mummified body. Draco wondered if the spirit of Delphi was roasting marshmallows up there or something. "Whoa," Nico said as he climbed off the bus. "Is that a climbing wall?" "Yeah," Percy said. "Why is there lava pouring down it?" "Little extra challenge. Come on, I'll introduce you to Chiron." "Zoe, have you met?" "I know Chiron," Zoe said stiffly. "Tell him we will be in cabin 8. Hunters, follow me." When she said hunters, she wasn't talking about Draco. He knew it, and he knew that he wasn't going to reside in the same cabin as them. "I'll show you the way," Grover offered. "We know the way." "Oh, really? It's no trouble. It's easy to get lost here if you don't." He tripped over a canoe and came up still talking. "Like my old daddy goat used to say, come on." Zoe rolled her eyes, but Draco guesses she figured there was no getting rid of Grover. The hunters shouldered their packs and their bows and headed off toward the cabins. As Bianca D'Angelo was leaving, she leaned over and whispered something in her brother's ear. She looked at him for an answer, but Nico just scowled and turned away. "Take care, sweethearts," Apollo called after the hunters. He winked at Percy. "Watch out for those prophecies, Draco. I'll see you soon." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he hopped back in the bus. "Later, Talia," he called. "And, be good." He looked at Draco with an identifiable look. He gave a mysterious smile when he spoke. "Be careful. Your presence here is significant to us. Even my vision of prophecy becomes cloudy when you get involved." He then turned again to look at Talia. He gave her a wicked smile, as if he knew something she didn't. Then he closed the doors and revved the engine. They turned aside as the sun chariot took off in a blast of heat. When they looked back, the lake was steaming. A red Maserati soared over the woods, glowing brighter and climbing higher until it disappeared in a ray of sunlight. Nico was still looking grumpy. Draco wondered what his sister had told him. "Who's Chiron?" he asked. "I don't have his figurine." "Our activities director," Percy said. "He's a centaur," Draco interrupted. "The one who has taught the greatest number of heroes, one of the best teachers of all times. His legend is well known." "If those hunter girls don't like him," Nico grumbled, "that's good enough for me. Let's go." Draco was surprised when he realized how empty the camp was. But soon he understood why it was like that. Most half-bloods only trained during summer. Just the year-rounders would be here. The ones who didn't have homes to go or would get attacked by monster too much if they left. But there didn't even seem to be many of them, either. The big house was decorated with strings of red and yellow fireballs that warmed the porch but didn't seem to catch anything on fire. Inside, flames crackled in the hearth. The air smelled like hot chocolate. Draco spotted a guy who was radiating divinity, Mr. D, and a centaur, Chiron, playing a quiet game of cards in the parlor. Chiron looked like a middle-aged man from waist up, with thinning brown hair, bushy eyebrows, intense brown eyes, and a scruffy beard. His lower half is that of a white stallion. He wore a fuzzy sweater with a hoof-print design on it, and he had a blanket on his lap that almost hid his wheelchair completely. Dionysus, also known as Mr. D, is the Greek god of grape harvest, wine, madness, parties, religious ecstasy, and theater. He also serves as the camp director of Camp Half-Blood, having been placed there by his father Zeus as punishment for chasing after an off-limits nymph. Dionysus has a chubby face, a red nose, and curly hair so black it looks purple. He has watery, blue, bloodshot eyes from drinking. Although it was winter, he had a tiger-striped Hawaiian shirt. Anyone can tell he's no stranger to wine just by looking at him. However, Draco didn't think that this was his true appearance. Chiron smiles when he saw them. Percy, Talia, and these boys must be Nico D'Angelo, Percy said. He and his sister are half-bloods. The other one is Draco, one of the hunters. Chiron's and Dionysus's eyes opened wide, but then they relaxed and put on a face of understanding. Chiron looked at Nico and breathed a sigh of relief. You succeeded then? Well, his smile melted. What's wrong? And where is Annabeth? Oh dear, Dionysus said in a bored voice. Not another one lost. Draco had been trying not to pay attention to Dionysus, but he was kind of hard to ignore in his neon orange leopard skin warm-up suit and his purple running shoes. Like Dionysus had ever run a day in his immortal life. A golden laurel wreath was tilted sideways on his curly black hair, which must have meant he'd won the last hand of cards. What do you mean? Talia asked. Who else is lost? Just then, Grover trotted into the room, grinning like crazy. He had a black eye and red lines on his face that looked like a slap mark. The hunters are all moved in. Chiron frowned and looked towards Draco. The hunters, eh? I see. We have much to talk about. He glanced at Nico. Grover, perhaps you should take our young friend to the den and show him our orientation film. But, oh right. Yes, sir. Orientation film? Nico asked. Is it G or PG? 'Cause Bianca is kinda strict. It's PG-13, Grover said. Cool. Nico happily followed him out of the room. Now, Chiron said to the rest of them, perhaps you three should sit down and tell us the whole story. When they were done, Chiron turned to Dionysus. We should launch a search for Annabeth immediately. I'll go, Talia and Percy said at the same time. Dionysus sniffed. Certainly not. Talia and Percy started complaining, but Dionysus held up his hand. He had an angry purplish fire in his eyes, which probably meant something bad or godly was going to happen if they didn't shut up. From what you've told me, Dionysus said, we have broken even on this escapade. We have, regrettably lost Annie Bell. Annabeth, Percy snapped. She'd gone to camp since she was 7, and still, Dionysus pretended to know her name. Yes, he said. And you procured a small annoying boy to replace her. So, I see no point risking further half-bloods on a ridiculous rescue. The possibility is very great that this Annie girl is dead. Even Draco wanted to strangle this god right now. A girl who should have been in his care had disappeared, but he still had this same shitty attitude. Annabeth may be alive, Chiron said, but Draco could tell he was having trouble sounding upbeat. He'd practically raised Annabeth all those years. She was a year-round camper before she'd given living with her dad and stepmom a second try. She's very bright. If our enemies have her, she will try to play for time. She may even pretend to cooperate. That's right, Talia said. Luke would want her alive. Luke. Draco remembered that Talia had mentioned him before. He was one of her friends that escaped 7 years ago, one of those she died to protect. Now it seems that Luke is an enemy? Draco still didn't understand well what is the situation here. So he just keeps quiet and learned the story with the little details coming from here and there. In which case, said Dionysus, I'm afraid she will have to be smart enough to escape on her own. Percy got up from the table. Percy. Chiron's tone was full of warning. Percy knew that Dionysus was not somebody to mess with. But right now he didn't care. You're glad to lose another camper, he said. You'd like it if we all disappeared. Dionysus stifled a yawn. You have a point? Yeah, he growled. Just because you were sent here as a punishment doesn't mean you have to be a lazy jerk. This is your civilization, too. Maybe you could try helping out a little. For a second, there was no sound except the crackle of the fire. The light reflected in Dionysus's eyes, giving him a sinister look. He opened his mouth to say something, probably a curse, when Nico burst into the room, followed by Grover. So cool! Nico yelled, holding his hands out to Chiron. You're a centaur. Chiron managed a nervous smile. Yes, Mr. D'Angelo, if you please. Though, I prefer to stay in human form in this wheelchair for, first encounters. And whoa, he looked at Dionysus. You're the wine dude? No way. Dionysus turned his eyes away from Percy and gave Nico a look of loathing. The wine dude? Dionysus, right? Oh wow, I got your figurine. My figurine? In my game, Mythomagic. And a holofoil card, too. And even you've only got like 500 attack points, and everybody thinks you're the lamest god card, I totally think your powers are sweet. Ah. Dionysus seemed truly perplexed, which probably saved Percy's life. Well, that's gratifying. Percy, Chiron said quickly, you and Talia go down to the cabins. Inform the campers we'll be playing Capture the Flag tomorrow evening. Capture the flag? He asked. But we don't have enough. It's a tradition, Chiron said. A friendly match whenever the hunters visit. Yeah, Talia muttered. I bet it's really friendly, Di. Chiron jerked his head toward Dionysus, who was still frowning as Nico talked about how many defenses points all the gods had in his game. Run along now, Chiron told them. All right, Talia said. Come on, boys. Oh, dragon. Chiron directed his first words to Draco. I would like to talk with you alone later, if you don't mind. Draco nodded his head and followed the two demigods. Percy, what are you thinking? You've already got Ares on your bad side. Talia reminded to Percy as they trudged toward the cabins. You need another immortal enemy? Wait, Draco said. You are Ares' enemy? Percy's face went dark. He sighed and explained to Draco. Yeah, last year, my first summer as a camper, I'd gotten in a fight with Ares, and now he and all his children wanted to kill me. I didn't need to make Dionysus mad, too. He looked at Talia and said, Sorry. I couldn't help it. It's just so unfair. She stopped by the armory and looked out across the valley, toward the top of Half-Blood Hill. Her pine tree was still there, the golden fleece glittering in its lowest branch. The tree's magic always protected the borders of the camp, but it no longer used Talia's spirit for power. Percy, everything is unfair, Talia muttered. Sometimes I wish. She didn't finish, but her tone was so sad that Draco felt sorry for her. Finally, Draco couldn't take it anymore. He put one hand on both of their heads, which were much shorter than he was. Percy was 14, and Talia was physically almost 16. We'll get Annabeth back, Draco promised. Even if I don't know her, I will help you. It's just that, I don't know how yet. They looked at Draco in surprise, and they flashed a sad little smile. Percy seemed to have gained some encouragement from Draco's words. Yes, we'll get Annabeth back. First, I found out that Luke is lost, Talia said. Now, Annabeth, don't think like that. You're right. She straightened up. We'll find a way. Over at the basketball court, a few of the hunters were shooting hoops. One of them was arguing with a guy from the Ares cabin. The Ares kid had his hand on his sword, and the hunter girl looked like she was going to exchange her basketball for a bow and arrow at any second. I'll break that up, Talia said. You circulate around the cabins. Tell everybody about Capture the Flag tomorrow. All right, I'm going to face you two tomorrow, Percy said. Yeah, good luck tomorrow. The cabins were the weirdest collections of buildings you've ever seen. Zeus and Hera's big white column buildings, cabins 1 and 2, stood in the middle with 5 gods' cabins on the left and 5 goddesses' cabins on the right, so they all made AU around the central green and the barbecue hearth. Draco and Percy made the rounds, telling everybody about Capture the Flag. Percy woke up some Ares kid from his midday nap, and he yelled at him to go away. He asked for some Clarice, and the boy said, went on a quest for Chiron. Top secret. Is she okay? Haven't heard from her in a month. She's missing in action. Like your what's gonna be if you don't get out of here. They decided to let him go back to sleep. Percy led Draco to cabin 3, the cabin of Poseidon. It was a low-gray building hewn from sea stone, with shells and coral fossils imprinted in the rock. So, this is where you live? Draco asked. Yeah, I lived alone in my first summer, but last summer, the second one, my half-brother Tyson appeared. You know, he's a cyclops, so I was kind of bad to him at the start. But he is a good guy, and he is now working on my dad's forges. Percy's smile talking about his half-brother was genuine. Some adventures had happened last summer for Percy and his brother, so they could get that fraternal relationship. Percy started leaving all his things in the cabin, including Annabeth's cap and his shield destroyed by the Manticore. At that moment, Draco heard a strange sound, water gurgling. At the back of the cabin was a big basin of gray sea rock, with a spout like the head of a fish carved in stone. Out of its mouth burst a stream of water, a saltwater spring that trickled into the pool. The water must have been hot because it sent mist into the cold winter air like a sauna. It made the room feel warm and summery, fresh with the smell of the sea. Percy stepped up to the pool. He looked into the water and said, "Thanks, Dad." So, it probably was a gift from Poseidon. The surface rippled. At the bottom of the pool, coins shimmered a dozen or so golden drachma. When we offered a drachma to Iris, goddess of the rainbow, we can communicate with anyone. This is our main way of communication, Percy explained to Draco. He opened the nearest window, and the wintry sunlight made a rainbow in the mist. Then he fished a coin out of the hot water. "Iris, O goddess of the rainbow," he said, "accept my offering." He tossed a coin into the mist, and it disappeared. Percy seems to hesitate for a moment. Then he made up his mind. "Show me Tyson," he requested. "At the forges of the Cyclopes." Tyson. Draco didn't realize it before, but that name sounds too familiar to him. The mist shimmered, and the image of a young Cyclops appeared. He was surrounded in fire, which would have been a problem if he weren't a Cyclops. He was bent over an anvil, hammering a red-hot sword blade. Sparks flew, and flames swirled around his body. There was a marble-framed window behind him, and it looked out onto dark blue water, the bottom of the ocean. "Tyson!" he yelled. He didn't hear Percy at first because of the hammering and the roar of the flames. "Tyson!" He turned, and his one enormous eye widened. His face broke into a crooked yellow grin. "Percy!" He dropped the sword blade and ran towards Percy, trying to give him a hug. The vision blurred, and Percy instinctively lurched back. "Tyson, it's an Iris message. I'm not really here." "Oh." He came back into view, looking embarrassed. "Oh, I knew that." "Yes." Draco couldn't help but thought that this guy was stupid. Tyson seemed to notice Draco. He turned to him, and then back Percy. "Percy, who is him?" "His name is Draco," Percy said. "He's my new friend, and he's a dragon." "A dragon? Amazing." Tyson seems to be a childish and clumsy Cyclops, but Draco could that he is smarter than he looks. "Hey, nice to meet you, Tyson. You have a pretty name." "Thanks." "How are you, Tyson?" Percy asked. "How's the job?" His eye lit up. "Love the job. Look." He picked up the hot sword blade with his bare hands. "I made this. That's really cool. I wrote my name on it. Right there. Awesome. Listen, do you talk to Dad much?" Tyson's smile faded. "Not much. Daddy is busy. He is worried about the war." "What do you mean?" Draco was also confused. Which war was going to happen? The only war that happened back on DxD was the one against the Khaos Brigade, but the Greeks weren't affected by it besides the battle against Trihexa. Tyson sighed. He stuck the sword blade out of the window, where it made a cloud of boiling bubbles. When Tyson brought it back in, the metal was cool. Old sea spirits making trouble. Aigeos Oceanus. Those guys? Draco sort of knew what he was talking about. He meant the immortals who ruled the oceans back in the days of the Titans, before the Olympians took over. But Draco didn't understand why they are moving now. The Titan Lord Kronos and his allies are gaining strength, Percy explained to Draco when he saw that he didn't understand. So, the Greeks are having a civil war, or are going to go in one. Kronos wants to get back what was his, and is going to go war to get it. The problem was if they were allied with the Khaos Brigade or not. "Is there anything I can do?" Percy asked. Tyson shook his head sadly. "We are arming the mermaids. They need 1,000 more swords by tomorrow." He looked at his sword blade and sighed. "Old spirits are protecting the bad boat." "The Princess Andromeda?" Percy said. "Luke Boat." "Luke?" Draco asked when he heard that name again. In Talia's words, he was lost. "Luke." Percy gritted his teeth. "He is a traitor. He works for Kronos. He was the one that poisoned Talia's tree back then." Draco was surprised by this revelation. Luke was Talia and Annabeth's friend back then. Why is he working with Kronos now? Old spirits are protecting the bad boat. They make it hard to find. Protect it from daddy's storms. Otherwise, he would smash it. Poseidon, Lord of the Sea, wouldn't have any problem to destroy his enemies in the water. Very few beings can defeat him there. What can a group of demigods and monsters do to him? Anything. Smashing it would be good, Percy said. Tyson perked up as if he'd just had another thought. Annabeth, is she there? Oh well. Percy seems to have difficulties right now. She's not here right now, Draco said on his behalf. Tell her hello. He beamed. Hello to Annabeth. Okay, I'll do that. And Percy, don't worry about the bad boat. It's going away. What do you mean? Panama Canal. Very far away. Percy frowned, and Draco understood what he was thinking. Luke had to have a reason to go all the way down there. All right, Percy said, not feeling reassured. That's good, I guess. In the forges, a deep voice bellowed something they couldn't make out. Tyson flinched. Gotta get back to work. Boss will get mad. Good luck, brother Draco. Bye. Draco waved at him. Okay, tell Dad. But before Percy could finish, the vision shimmered and faded. Well, he's a nice guy. Percy smiled a little. He is? The dining pavilion is an area of Camp Half-Blood where the demigods, satyrs, and camp directors eat their meals. The pavilion is framed in Greek columns on a hill that overlooks the sea. No walls or roof cover the mess hall. Torches blaze from the columns, and a central fire burning inside a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each table has a white cloth with purple trim. Draco was surprised when he realized that the pavilion's goblets were enchanted, and, on voice command, will be filled with whatever drink you desire. Another quality of the goblets is that they never empty. Food was really varied, and it includes barbecue, grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, and fresh bread, which were served by wood nymphs. The tables in the pavilion are arranged so that there is a table for each god, similar to the cabins. Therefore, children of Hermes sit at the Hermes table, children of Aphrodite at the Aphrodite table, etc. Although children of the big three often have to sit on their own anyway, it's expressly forbidden to sit at another god's table. Even though they are not Artemis' true daughters, hunters sit at the Artemis table. Satyrs and nymphs can sit at any table they please. Still, they generally sit at the table that Dionysus sits at, which is table 12. It seems that Artemis has talked to her father, Zeus, and he had given permission to Draco to stay in cabin 1, Zeus' cabin. With this, he also allowed Draco to sit with her while dining. It was a silent diner, since Talia wasn't in the mood to hold a conversation. The same was for Percy, who was sitting alone in his table. The Hephaestus, Ares, and Hermes cabins had a few people. Nico sat in the Hermes table with a pair of brothers, since new campers always got stuck in the Hermes cabins if their Olympian parent was unknown. The brothers seemed to be trying to convince Nico that poker was a much better game than Mythomagic. The only table that really seemed to be having a good time was the Artemis table. The hunters drank and ate and laughed like one big happy family. Zoe sat at the head like she was the mama. She didn't laugh as much as the others, but she did smile from time to time. Her silver lieutenant's band glittered in the dark brads of her hair. Draco thought that she looked a lot nicer when she smiled. Bianca D'Angelo seemed to be having a great time. She was trying to learn how to arm wrestle from Phoebe, the big girl who'd picked a fight with the Ares kid on the basketball court. The bigger girl was beating her every time, but Bianca didn't seem to mind. When they'd finished eating, Chiron made the customary toast to the gods. Every night, the Half-Bloods tribute a portion of their food to the gods by burning it in the pavilion fire. Hestia takes a small part of each tribute and formally welcomed the hunters of Artemis. The clapping was pretty half-hearted. Then he announced the Goodwill Capture the Flag game for the next night, which got a lot better reception. Afterwards, they all trailed back to their cabins for an early winter lights out. Draco went with Talia to Zeus' cabin.